welcome to the March 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Wakefield Town Council. It's nice to say that with the sun shining behind me, shining, so to speak, not to be in the dark. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If we could begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which we stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I just want to see, just checking on our, who's here for Town Council. For attendance, it looks like we are all here except perhaps Peter May. I don't see him in the galley, but I'm sure he'll be joining us shortly. Prior to beginning public participation, we have a lot of public participation, and we also have probably a good 3-hour meeting. So I would ask people to keep that in mind. And before folks are asked to speak and we explain the participation, I just have want to take a few moments to make a comment, and then I'm going to ask Steve to address some of the issues that I know that are before us. But something that's been weighing on my mind, I've been hearing lately that some good people in Wakefield and a lot of people in Wakefield are concerned that over the past few months, Wakefield has become a community that is not so welcoming. My concern is that a small vocal minority are banging drums loudly with an undercurrent that outsiders or newcomers are not welcome, or at least they're not welcome to voice their opinion. And words matter. It's something I've said for years. I wish all of Wakefield could experience the lens I view my neighbors with on Converse Street. We are Democrats, Republicans, townies, new residents, residents of color, different religions, seniors, and young families, and somehow it all works for us. We differ on opinions, we have robust discussions. They are typically in person, around a fire, with beer. We've done it during COVID times with social distancing and masks, and it works. We truly care about one another. And I think maybe because we talk face to face, where there are consequences for misstating facts or for being somewhat dismissive, in whether intentionally or unintentionally cruel, making comments that are intentionally or unintentionally hurtful. What is happening on social media or in writing may not be the reality of the larger community of Wakefield, and I don't think it is. But reality is often perception, and that's what I'm concerned about. I don't know why so many people are afraid of differences. The beautiful fabric of this town is woven through the hands of immigrants and has always been. The vast majority of us are either grandchildren of immigrants or children of immigrants. I also want to add, and I know that my fellow Councillor Ed Dombrowski would want me to mention this as well during White Ribbon Month, that in White Ribbon Month is where men typically wear white ribbons, pledging to never take part in, condone, or stay silent about violence against women. With the massacre that was committed against overwhelmingly Asian women in Georgia, we have to acknowledge in our own community that people might feel threatened or violence. Not all issues, global or national, find their way to Wakefield, but many do, and I think this one has. I hope that everyone will pledge with me that our Asian neighbors may need a little bit of encouragement and kindness right now. We have businesses that I'm sure were impacted by what happened. My point is that we are a community that has historically supported one another in the darkest hours and shared joy in the brightest times. Please remember that. And please remember that words do matter. And it is not difficult to challenge each other with civility and sometimes seeing opinions through someone else's lens is really important. So it's something that's been weighing on my mind. And as chair of town council, I just wanted to say that. Thank you. For public engagement is, we have a lot of folks today. People have 3 minutes. It's not, engagement is probably the wrong word because we listen to you, but it's not a back and forth. We're not going to chat. We're not going to discuss any issues that you bring up now, because in fairness, some of these issues are already before boards in town, or they will be in the future. And that's the time really to dig into them. Steve, at this point time, before we dive into it, I know that you have seen some of the topics on public engagement, and you might have some information for us.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. If I could, on the Broadway crossing, we have a lot of people that have reached out on the Broadway crossing, and unfortunately, there's a lot of confusion out there. And let me, a while back, we had our town engineer, Bill Renaud, give a kind of an overview of this, and maybe it needs to be repeated as well. So this might put some people at ease. Well, in any event, no one wants Broadway more open than we do at Town Hall, that crossing. The reason why it is still closed is because we are awaiting approval from the Federal Railroad Association in Washington, D.C. to tell us that we can continue to enjoy a quiet zone throughout the train tracks all through Wakefield. What it would mean is that if we could not enjoy that, is that every time a train passed through a crossing from the Reading line to the Melrose line, they would blow their whistles. We had that for a brief time a number of years ago, and our neighbors that live on the train tracks and maybe a little bit, few blocks away, were crazed because this happened at 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, whenever. So basically, Wakefield enjoyed a quiet zone for a while, and we were up for a review coming in a year or so anyway. That review got moved up a little bit just by chance because of some of the work on Broadway with National Grid. Apparently, the local federal railroad reviewers kind of felt that really Wakefield should not have enjoyed a quiet zone because of some crash history we had at a couple of the sites. And you might remember that we had some tragic crashes. However, we went and reworked some of the engineering on some of the sites. We felt that there was some miscalculations by the Federal Railroad Association, and we actually filed an amended notice of quiet zone establishment and amended a public authority application with the FRA in December of 2020. This is to maintain our quiet zone. Were we to reopen Broadway while this was pending, we would have lost all grandfathering status. So that's why it's remained closed. They're very clear about that. So that has been there for a while. There is a 60-day comment period. That's the federal rule, not ours. And they had no comments. Right now, I hear we are probably second up for review by someone in Washington, D.C. And I have this vision that there is one person at a desk in the basement of some Washington, D.C. office that has stacks of plans and reviews them all alone. It sounds like there's not a lot of staff there. We reached out to Senator Markey's office, and I believe we got moved up on the list to second, or moved up. So now we are in second place from what I hear. This review will be conducted this month being March, and they're being 8 days away as far as I know. We are very hopeful that we will get a email or a call from the FRA stating that we looked at your calculations, you're good. That's what we're hearing locally, and we can continue on. Open up the Broadway station. We'll put back the island. That'll take a day, and our guys will do that, and then that'll be open up. We all want that open with all the construction going on. It's crazy, and I get it. I have to get around town a lot, and I know that it bothers people. So that's where we are on Broadway. Long term, I will say, long term, we may have to look at our all of our crossings, getting quad gates where those 4 gates come down. So that's a long-term plan that we may have to go into and have to plan for. A great earmark from the federal government, I would ask for that. So, but right now, that's where we are with Broadway. I know there's a lot of questions on it. Somebody said it's going to be closed for a year. That doesn't sound like that's reasonable to me. We're hoping and expecting that we're a few days away. So I just wanted to give some update on that, Madam Chair, if that's okay. Maybe
when do people get to speak up?
You're going to be called for public participation, and then you get 3 minutes, but it's not a back and forth.
Okay.
We're just giving an introduction to some of the topics that might answer some people's questions. Okay, so Sherry, in order of folks who reached out to you, And Steve will be on timing the comments.
Okay, so I'm not sure if it's Jackie or John Natali who was on with us tonight, but they reached out. It's Jackie, okay?
Hi.
Hi.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jackie Natali. As I was just introduced, I live at 65 Plymouth Road. I'm here on behalf of my family, John, my daughters, and my neighbors, many of whom are logged in tonight to this meeting. And I am here to express my concerns about the Broadway Road closure. And I will cut some of my remarks down. I do understand why the road is closed. I paid very close attention to everything that has been said and presented, and I understand that the proposal is in the hands of the FRA. However, 2 weeks ago at this very meeting, we were told the proposal would be approved any day now. We were told last week, we expect good news soon, but now, as Tim confirmed on Friday, that we're actually third in line to have our proposal reviewed. Maybe we've moved up one spot, which is great, but it's to have it reviewed, not approved by the one employee in the FRA who can approve this. Meanwhile, business owners are hearing that if this proposal isn't approved, Broadway could be closed for another year or more. So we are asking for more honesty, more accountability, and new ideas, because I don't know who's being held accountable for this, for all the costs that we may incur. Is it going to be National Grid? Is it going to be Wakefield taxpayers? What are we doing? What are you doing to support the local businesses that are struggling? What are we going to do if this plan doesn't get approved? What are we going to do for the residents if Broadway is closed for another year? How are you going to ensure that this doesn't happen with any future construction projects? I know you have more construction on your agenda tonight to be discussed, and I'm asking you, please, don't start any more construction until the current projects on Broadway, Albion, and Foundry Street are finished. It already takes me way too long to drive across town to go to Woodville, and I'm worried about what happens if, God forbid, my neighbor has a heart attack and an emergency vehicle can't get over here in time, or my house is on fire. I'm worried about early harvest going out of business. I'm worried about the impact on local business owners. Please communicate with us better and more honestly in the future. I understand this proposal is out of your hands right now, but I regret not speaking up sooner. I regret not opposing this Woburn to Wakefield project. I should have. My neighbors should have. Because now we're talking about moving, we're talking about selling our houses, and we're worried about our property values if this road never opens. We're ready to take more actions. We've contacted Seth Moulton ourselves, we've contacted Ed Markey, we're ready to go to the media, but I want to know what you're going to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
What about tax breaks?
So you can't just yell out. That's not how the meeting works. If you've signed up for public participation, we'll call on you and you can make your comment then. Sherry, who's next?
Okay, the next one is Bill Robinson, 185 Broadway Street. He has the same issue on the topic of Broadway Street.
Great, thank you. Bill?
Is Bill not on?
If he comes back, we can always, within public participation, we can reach out to him. But let's go to the next person.
Sure. The next topic is Crescent Street, and we have Sue Mitchell. She's at 14 Crescent Hill. I think she's on. Yeah, I see her.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sue Mitchell. I live at 14 Crescent Hill. My husband and I have concerns over the proposed 56-unit apartment building at the site of 44 to 48 Crescent Street, called Crescent Common Development. Namely, the size of the structure, the lack of parking, increased traffic, as well as the overall impact to the neighborhood and its residents. On March 15th, we sent a letter to the zoning board and the town council expressing our concerns, and I want to thank you all for your quick response to those letters. We do understand that town council does not have any authority over building permits and that this sits with the zoning board of appeals. We also understand that there is a 40B component to this project and that the town councils did send a letter to Mass Housing back in September of 2020 regarding all of the above concerns. I'm speaking tonight to you all to reiterate our concerns and ask town council to continue to monitor this project as well as others for the betterment of the town of Wakefield. I thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks very much, Sue. Sherry?
Yep, and the next one we have is Jerry Perrin of 7 Crescent Hill. He has the same comments.
Sure. Jerry?
Okay, we can come back to Jerry maybe.
I don't see him on here.
Okay. Okay, so the next one we have is Janet Hintlian, 11 Lake Street.
Okay.
I think I saw her on.
Okay. Please start. Yep, I see her on too. You need to unmute, Janet. You're still muted, I think.
Yeah,
There it is.
There you
there
are.
you go.
Okay. I just wanted to bring up a very similar issue that we have down here on Lake Street in Albion, as the Crescent Street issue was. We've had a tremendous amount of building going on here for a very long time. The Foundry condominiums, now the Harvard Mill building, adding floors to their section of the building that will be rentals. We're concerned about the traffic down on coming down from Albion to Lake Street onto Maple because they can't get onto Broadway with the 16-wheelers coming in at 6:30 in the morning with all of the things that they need for that building project. And the one-way coming out onto Lake Street. There are many times that I see vehicles trying to come from Foundry up Maple, and you've got 16-wheelers there and they're going up on the sidewalks to get out, but then you've got cars coming, taking a left from Lake onto Maple, and there's nowhere to go because you've got the trucks and all of the things that they need for that building. And then there is, and I don't know what you'd call it, but there is an area between the back of Foundry where those condos are, that they're making a throughway from there onto Lake Street, which is going to be a total disaster. And I've lived here for 7 years. And I tell you, the whole spatial ambiance, restful, everything, it's gone. And you know that your property values are probably going to be dropping. And the noise level is horrendous. And I know that the town did a traffic study, and that's what my concern is today, along with everything I said. What kind of a traffic study did this town do? Because if they did it, they wouldn't have done this, I would hope. So that's my question. I want to know what they did, and I'm sure they paid well a lot of money to have that traffic study done. But it didn't do anything. It made everything worse. I don't even think they did it, honestly. So it's become very frustrating. The town has just become any square patch of dirt that there is in the town of Wakefield, up goes a condominium with no thought process. The parking is going to be a nightmare here because there is very little. And the building over there at Harvard Mills is going to have a restaurant. So we're concerned at Wakefield Crossing that we're going to have a lot of issues of towing cars and so on and so forth, because there's nowhere for people to park. So traffic, parking, and traffic study those are my points.
Great. Thank you. And we can certainly reach out and ask about perhaps, you know, a traffic study was certainly done, but a traffic study can be redone again. It's part of the police department, someone in the police department does that. And this is not a back and forth with you, Ms. Hintian, but that's something that we can look out. We can ask them to take another look at it because perhaps something has changed. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Sherry, next person.
Yep, so the last ones that I know about are Peter McManama and Bob Brooks.
Okay. Mr. Brooks, you are muted.
How's
There you go.
that?
That's good.
Thank you. Members of the town council, my name is Bob Brooks, and I've been a resident of Wakefield for 45 years with my family reside at 7 June Circle. I, along with my June Circle neighbors and many residents from the surrounding neighborhood, are very concerned about the impact associated with 3 major construction projects scheduled all within 1 mile of our homes over the next 2 to 5 years. One is the construction of the new Northeast Metro Tech School to accommodate an additional 300 to 400 students. 2, the construction of new access road from Farm Street abutting June Circle to the entrance of the new Northeast Metro Tech School. And 3, the construction of major renovations of a new Wakefield Memorial High School on Farm Street. We, the 4 June Circle butters and 1 Farm Street abutter to the proposed access road, were made aware of this project in February of 2021 by the Wakefield Conservation Committee in a notice to abutters. We have participated in 2 Conservation Committee zone meetings, and we have also performed extensive research on this new Metro Tech School project. And comparable with projects, we have compiled a list of several questions regarding a PowerPoint presentation, which I believe was just added to the town council website. We're looking at the timeline and project decision-making, the mass blasting, as much of the proposed plan appears to be on the same rock formation as June Circle, the excessive construction noise, the water runoffs, especially near the wetlands and through the streets, increased traffic issues and public safety, and of critical importance, communication and transparency of the project information and decision-making. These questions are in that PowerPoint presentation that was provided to the town administrator and to all city town council members last week. We are seeking a forum and a process for our questions and issues to be answered by the appropriate parties, as well as to have input into the decision-making as appropriate and applicable. We would like to have the PowerPoint list of questions and issues shared by all Wakefield residents, encourage their input and support. I support the new schools, and as do many of my neighbors, as the new schools are so critical to our community development, long-term growth, and viability. Yet it is imperative that there is a process that includes transparency and representation from the neighbors and not decisions made in a vacuum, especially regarding the construction of the school, proposed access road, and public safety issues. Lastly, it was suggested by Mr. Mayo that many of our questions would be better suited for the zoning board and conservation committee. Yet from a budgetary standpoint, have you, along with the finance committee and director of economic development, included in your long-term planning and forecasting the impacts of the non-reimbursable MSBA cost from the new vocational school, as well as the non-reimbursable MSBA cost from the new Wakefield Memorial High School down the
Bob,
road?
you're over 3 minutes, so just if you could wrap it up, please.
Yes, I got 3 more sentences. Thank you.
Thank you.
Will there be a bond issuance? How will this impact the tax levy? And could we be looking at a debt exclusion? Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Bob, are you the only one speaking on this issue?
Yes, I'm the only one. Peter will
Okay.
not be speaking.
Okay, great, thank you. And I know as you've been in Wakefield and Peter has as well for a long time, obviously neither of these projects will go forward without intensive public participation. and forums and planning, like we've done the Galvin, like we've done every other school. So these schools will not be decided in a vacuum. They never have been. So I think your concerns are certainly valid concerns that will be brought up when the projects start getting a little more firmness around them. So thank you.
Yeah, so I just want to bring that up because we just really learned about this about 7 weeks ago, as opposed to this project being ongoing for 6 years now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I know we've talked about this, but yes, there certainly is going to be an opportunity for neighbors to get involved.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Sherry, any further public participation that you were notified of?
No, none.
Is anyone on the Zoom wanting to participate in public participation? All right.
Can you speak up if you're not on the list?
You can. You have to identify yourself and indicate your name and where you live, and you have 3 minutes to talk about anything.
Yeah, it would be less than 3 minutes. My name is Amy DiGiovanni and I live on 7 Plymouth Road. Again, being impacted by the Broadway closing. I guess I have a question and I know you can't answer it, but we've talked about it. Because of the inconvenience to us all not being able to cross the railroad, would there be any kind of consideration, or how would we go about demanding or wanting some kind of tax break? Because we're not able to, we moved here for our locations and I've got kids at the high school. And again, to have to go around, luckily it's 2 days a week, but when it's 5 days a week, to have to go around that way, and then you hit all the traffic with Albion and then North Ave and the construction, it's not okay. And honestly, it makes me angry every day. And I don't want to pay my taxes. And I think that we should get some kind of compensation. That's all that I have to say.
Thank you for your thoughts. I'm not sure if that's viable. I'm in the neighborhood as well, and I take Broadway multiple times a day in heading to work too. So I feel the pain without a doubt. I live not on Broadway, but just Broadway through Albion, and I take it every day. So I absolutely feel your pain, and we have been not happy with how the federal government has been handling this, but my understanding from talking with our town engineer is that the approval will happen. He talked about, you know what, it's not a back and forth, ma'am, I'm sorry. The approval's going to happen. He's confident based on how other projects are done. So I know how aggravating this is for folks. I'm living it with you. Thank you for your thoughts. And we hear the frustration, and that, will cause us to just check on this more, and putting out more information is something we can do. So thank you for your thoughts. Any other public participation?
I have something to say.
Okay, just identify yourself, your name, and your address, please.
My name is Tina Parent, and my address is 7 Crescent Hill, Wakefield, Mass. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Crescent Commons development.
Sure.
I know it's already been said a few times, but I just want to reiterate that about the parking situations here. I mean, we live on a really small street with a lot of houses and a lot of people, and this development, all the streets around us, there's no parking at all. And I mean, not like there isn't enough. I mean, there's none. You can't park on Water, you can't park on Vernon. There's a police department here, fire department here, so those spots are always taken. Just having them come here and not having adequate parking is one of the hugest situations for us. The second one is, I mean, even if it's just the people there, what about the maintenance people they're going to have? What about like cleaners or anybody else they're going to have in and out? What about the emergency vehicles? Like, we've had a lot of emergency situations on our little road, and it's hard enough for the fire department to get down here or the police to get down here. There's no way to turn around. And just by adding more to this area, it's just not going to be convenient for anyone. And it's not going to be healthy for the town. And I also want to say that I feel like they're abusing the 40B law. I mean, just to say that, oh, we're going to make it low income, makes it okay for them to congest our area, putting such a large thing in such a small area. It's just crazy. We're not happy with it. Our friends aren't happy. Our neighbors aren't happy. We're just hoping that anyone out there just listens to us and just comes and takes a look at what we're dealing with here before they just go ahead and sign off on a 40B.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did Tom Betcher have his hand up?
I put it as Jerry Turner.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Public participation?
Hi, Tom Betcher, 25 Wakefield Ave. I'm also Gas and Light Commissioner and Liaison to the Environmental Sustainability Committee. I just wanted to make a comment on the Green Community and Energy Stretch Code. I would like to implore the council to vote to bring this to warrant. I fully support this measure in town to make, this is one step to bringing us to a green community. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Tom. All right, Sherry, it looks like we're all set.
Ian, I think we're good.
All right, I'm looking at everyone's, I don't see anyone's hand up. Thank you all for coming and participating. We appreciate your thoughts. They sit with us and they inform us on certain decisions we're making going forward, or to reach out to other folks in town that can help you better perhaps than we can. So thank you all for coming. I know everyone is very busy. Item number 5, approval of the minutes. Can I please have a motion and a second to approve the March 8th, 2021 Town Council minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Paul,
Second.
seconded by Jonathan. Any discussion? Seeing none. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Maureen?
Yes.
Okay, and I don't think Peter is with us tonight. So 5-0, Sherry. Item number 6, the town meeting warrant article, the stretch code warrant article. So I am going to pass this off to Counselor Smith-Galvin.
Thank you very much. As you recall, last meeting, we spent a little time talking about the stretch code, but I wanted to bring it back. And before I invite Neil Duffy and Mike Berry, Neil is the regional coordinator for the Northeast Regional Coordinator for the Green Communities Act. He's going to walk us through things. But I know we had some discussion last time about who should bring the warrant forward. And just one reason I'm bringing in Neil and his team, I really believe that this should be moved forward by the town council as a whole. It is something that is very focused on all municipal buildings, the municipal fleet, and I feel I would very much like that the town council listen to this and consider bringing it forward as a vote from the town council. So I would like to invite Neil Duffy, who has really been a partner with us, is working with us behind the scenes on meeting the different criteria of the green communities, and ask him to give his presentation with a focus on the stretch code, which is what's before us today. Neil?
Thanks, Julie. Hopefully everyone can hear me, and if you can't, then let me know. I'm Neil Duffy. I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator for the Green Communities Division at the Mass Department of Energy Resources. Thank you all for your time tonight. I know you have a busy agenda, so I will try to get through this presentation quickly, but also provide you some information. I'm joined by Mike Berry from ICF International. ICF works with the Green Communities Division on stretch code outreach and analysis, and they also administer the Mass Save new construction program in the Commonwealth. So I'll do some overview slides, and then Mike will dive in a little bit on a little bit more of the technical details of the stretch code, and then we will wrap it up and take any questions. So next slide, please. So Green Communities Division, we like to consider ourselves the energy hub for all cities and towns, not just designated green communities. You can hit the next slide. We provide technical assistance and funding for clean energy projects to municipal facilities, as well as funding for vehicles or charging stations. Our flagship program is the Green Communities Designation and Grant Program, but we also have some other programs and consider ourselves sort of the liaison or primary contact for cities and towns to the state on anything clean energy, energy efficiency related. Next slide, please. So currently there are 271 green communities. That number should be going up probably to 280 in the next couple of weeks. And so about 80, I think it's like 85% of the population live in a green community. Next slide. We are authorized to provide up to $20 million annually in grants and loans, mostly grants. And the funding is coming from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, as well as alternative compliance payments from investor-owned utilities. And these grants fund energy efficiency initiatives and renewable energy and innovative projects in communities like yours. Next slide, please. Just to give you a sense of what some of your neighbors are doing who are green communities, you can see yourselves there in white, and there's a little bit of white around you. That is mostly to do with the fact that municipal light plants have sort of a more interesting path to becoming designated. So that's why there's a bit of a white splotch in that area of the map, because you live in an area of the state that has a lot of municipal light plants. But you can see some of the larger amounts here, like Woburn, especially Melrose. These are communities that have been designated for quite some time and have been able to take advantage of our grants year in and year out. Next slide, please. So the way the program works is once a municipality is designated, they receive a designation grant. That's $125,000 plus an adder, which is based on a formula based on your population and your per capita income. And so Wakefield's estimated designation grant amount would be around $170,000. Once that grant is spent and closed out, as a green community, Wakefield, as long as you fulfill our reporting requirements, you would be eligible for our annual competitive grants, which are capped at $200,000 per applicant. Next slide, please. There are 5 criteria. I won't go into all of them. We're here to talk about the 5th one, which is the stretch code. You can go to the next slide, please. So just for disclosure purposes, this is the language that's in the statute about criteria 5. And just to say that the criteria does not state that a municipality is required to adopt the stretch code. The requirement is that you need to reduce life cycle costs for all new construction. And the only way that we are aware of communities' ability to do that is through the stretch code. So it's just, this slide is just to make clear that the stretch code is not required by law, but it's the only way that we know that communities can reduce life cycle costs of new construction. So next slide, please. Currently, 288 municipalities have adopted the stretch code. Again, we're getting towards somewhere around like 86% of the population is in a stretch code community. And that 288 number, as the other map that you saw that showed 271 green communities. So you can somewhat safely assume that pretty soon there'll probably be at least 288 green communities over the next year. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is the stretch code? Some important things to know about the stretch code is that it only applies to new residential construction and new commercial construction over 100,000 square feet or over 40,000 square feet for conditioned spaces like labs or supermarkets. So additions, renovations, and repairs of existing buildings are exempt from the stretch code, meaning that the code that you have in place now, the base energy code, is what would apply. There's no difference. So if someone's renovating their kitchen, nothing would change if Wakefield adopted the stretch code. It's just if people are building new homes is when there would be a difference. And then the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Berry. I think he's joined us, so I'll turn it over to him.
Thanks, Neil. Everyone can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, so Neil really set it up really well for me as far as kind of giving you the background on the stretch code. Obviously, its base is in the Mass Building Code. And so for full transparency, I've been doing these stretch code presentations now for, it's 11 years now. The map that Neil showed of the 288 communities that have adopted stretch code, I've done about 240 of them. So I've heard every reason to not adopt, and I've seen every reason why towns should adopt. And I think someone who spoke earlier and mentioned that this should move ahead. The stretch code, as you're going to see, isn't much of a stretch anymore. So back in 2010, when the code did come out, it was truly a stretch. Building codes, especially energy codes, change all the time. And so to what Neil spoke of is the fact that this code only affects residential new construction. I can't stress that enough. So new construction of residential buildings and commercial buildings, and not renovations or repairs or alterations. Those would fall under the code you have today. And the reason why that's important is because that is the probably biggest question we'll get regarding the stretch code. And so what the stretch code really does is when a town adopts a stretch code, you are basically taking the code you have today and you're removing one of the two paths to compliance. So today in Wakefield, you can build a home two ways. You can follow the prescriptive path, which is basically what the code says you need to do to build a home, or you can follow the performance path. And the performance path allows what we call trade-offs. And later in the slides, you'll see what that means, but allows you to model a home to see how it will actually perform. And not just rely on the fact that a prescriptive code is going to build a great house. I always use the analogy of this is like baking a cake. Some people bake cakes, they follow, a recipe that's on a box, and some people follow the way that they've baked the cake forever. And the performance path truly allows that ability for someone to have those trade-offs and use ingredients as they see fit, as long as they're meeting the base of the code. So if we go to the next slide. So what changes is the removal of the prescriptive code. So this is the biggest change that occurs when a town adopts the stretch code, is for anything residential new or commercial new construction, you're removing the prescriptive path for code compliance. So the only way you can build a home in Wakefield would be using the performance path. As Neil showed on the map that showed the stretch code and also the green communities map, back in 2010 when towns were looking to adopt this, and it was truly a stretch because it was a future iteration of the code. What was more difficult too is a lot of builders had not done performance-based construction, meaning they had primarily the way we built homes in Massachusetts was following the prescriptive path. As the codes have changed and as they continue to change, there'll be more and more emphasis and focus on performance-based codes. So whether Wakefield adopts a stretch code today or in the next year, the codes are going to change. And when they do change, they're going to go to more performance-based codes. So essentially adopting the stretch code is adopting a future iteration of the code before it comes into play and before it becomes general law. So if we go to the next slide. Why we test for performance is that, as I mentioned, prescriptive codes are good. They tell us what we need to put into a home, what kind of windows to install, how much insulation. But what they don't always guarantee is how those things are installed. So we test for performance because we want to make sure that the areas we live in and not the areas we don't, like basements and attics, we're not losing heat through those spaces. And anyone who's ever had a home that's had significant ice damming or any other issues, primarily that's a flaw in the design of that home. And again, the home wasn't built to code, it was built to code, but the little tiny areas we miss, like those small air gaps where we can lose heat into unconditioned space, can really add up. And so we test for performance to make sure our home is actually performing as it should, not as it says it should. And so in order to do that, we employ in the building process in towns that have adopted the stretch code, or in towns where people just do performance path construction, they work with a home energy rater. And you're going to hear a little bit more about the home energy rater next. So if we can go to the next slide. So a home energy rater works and basically calculates things homes on what they call the home energy rating standard. And what you see to the right on the slide is the home energy rating index. So this is a scale, it's like a thermometer. So as you move up the scale, you're moving towards homes that are older, inefficient. I live in the Cape. My home was built in 1830. My home at the time when I bought it was way above the 150 mark. But as you move down this scale, you're actually becoming more energy efficient. And what the scale was actually created for was by the home energy efficiency mortgage industry, to make sure that when people took a loan on a home to do upgrades to better their efficiency, that there was going to be a payback in energy savings. So again, as you move down this scale, you can move to what they call net zero homes. This is a home that uses as much power as it puts back into the grid. Again, not the norm yet, but we are moving to more and more down this scale. So the current today in Wakefield, if you were to build a home, the current target you would have to hit through the performance path is a 55. That's the same for the stretch code. So again, at one point was a huge stretch. Now the code's aligned. The only thing that changes, again, is the removal of that prescriptive path. So if we go to the next slide. So a HERS rater, the picture you see is someone setting up what we call a blower door. They're testing for infiltration. So they're testing for leakage. They're seeing how much a home leaks by forcing it to. Again, in earlier versions of the code, this was not a requirement. Today in Wakefield, any home that's built, regardless of the path it takes, prescriptive or performance, has to have a blower door test done. If it has ducts and the ducts are outside conditioned space, the ducts have to be tested. So what you're seeing in that red box, that's all now code today in Wakefield. So what's the only thing the stretch code adds in is the review of building plans via computer modeling software, and then the final rating or the final energy model. So what a rater does is they take a set of plans, they input it into an energy software, they calculate to see if it hits that HERS 55. If it does, there's no changes that need to be made to the home. If the home doesn't meet a HERS 55, the HERS rater will make suggestions and say, maybe if you put on better windows, or if you add a little bit more insulation, or we really focus on how the insulation is installed or where your leakage may be in your home. Little changes make big impacts, and that's where the home energy rater comes in. Once the home is under construction, the HERS rater works very closely with the builder and the town to make sure the builder has all the documentation they need for permitting. They also do a midpoint inspection, which they're checking the installation of insulation to make sure that was installed properly. And then finally, they're going to be doing a final blower door test, taking all the results of the home, feeding them into that computer software, and then doing a final calculation. Big question we're always asked, what happens if the home doesn't meet the target? Well, again, a HERS rater is a subcontractor to the builder. So just as if a plumber misses something in the plumbing code, or an electrician misses something in the electrical code, the HERS rater is going to work with the builder to make that right. And so one of the things that we always like to point out now is that in Massachusetts, as across the country, most of the time, builders are nomadic. They don't stay in one town. So again, when the stretch code first came out and a lot of builders weren't building to the performance path, this was truly something that was a little bit hard for a lot of builders to understand. Now that builders are building to the stretch code in other communities, and then coming into Wakefield, you're probably seeing a lot of builders who are taking advantage of using the same process, the performance path, in your town, even though it's not a requirement, it's an option. And so the reason, again, why that's changed is the fact that they now have more performance path procedures in the building code today than they did in the past. And again, we're likely to see that continue on that path as energy codes are adopted, and they're adopted every 3 to 4 years. Next slide. So these are 2 energy modeling analyses that my company did. What we did is we looked at the average home built in Massachusetts. We normalized it to the city of Worcester because Worcester has their weather climate is somewhat in the middle of the state, and so therefore we're looking for something that's pretty close to, but can be used for comparison. So the average home built is 2,550 square feet. It's a 3-bedroom single family home. What we did is we put together 2 analyses of a home, one electrically heated and one heated with natural gas. And what you're going to see is that basically there is an additional cost to meeting the stretch code, but because of the energy savings that are gained by building this home better, and actually just upping things slightly, and again, very slightly, you're able to reap the benefits of those costs right up front. So an electrically heated home in this option here, what you can see is when this home was originally designed, it was only going to meet a 60 on the HERS index, and that's that corner box you see at the top of the screen. It says HERS index target and then example. And again, it has to hit a 55 to meet code compliance. By doing what we're going to show you was done with this home, they were able to achieve a 52, so 3 points less. Their out-of-pocket cost was $2,260. Made a slight change to the down payment, again, one-time cost, but then that cost going into the mortgage, and again, annually, you're paying $180 over a 30-year fixed mortgage to cover that $2,260 cost. And then when you factor in your energy savings, which should be basically, it says a negative, but basically you're going to be saving $490 a year compared to that same electrically heated home that was originally targeted. That code built that home that didn't meet the code. And what basically comes out is that you're cash positive in year 1, and then obviously in year 2, 3, again, energy costs tend to fluctuate, and as they do, if they go up, you're obviously going to save more money. If they happen to go down, which tends not to even happen in some muni territories, but you can see with this example, the home is cash positive. If you go to the next slide, what this shows is the home features that were changed. So in blue, the base code home, so that's a home that was as designed, not as suggested to meet the stretch code. So the HERS rating was a 64, it achieved a 52. Your out-of-pocket cost were $500 for windows, so going from a 0.30 window, which is code today in Massachusetts, going to a 0.27 window, so a little bit better performing window. Moving from a pretty standard, inefficient domestic hot water tank to a heat pump hot water tank, and then moving from a heat pump, which is the federal minimum you see on the blue side, and moving to a slightly more energy efficient heat pump. The cost you see is the incremental cost. The person was going to pay for a heat pump, a hot water tank, or windows. Regardless, this is the incremental cost to go to a better efficiency, and that's where the savings are gained. You'll see down below, you'll see some of the things that say no change required. Again, working with a HERS rater, you have a third a third person who's there to verify things are being done right. Wouldn't we all like to know that when our insulation was installed, it was installed properly? It wasn't bent around pipe, it wasn't squished behind pipes or bent around outlet boxes. It was actually cut properly and actually makes contact on all sides. We want to make sure that all the gaps that are supposed to be sealed for things like fire code and just general infiltration are sealed. We're paying these prices already. We're paying for these contractors to do their job. We want to make sure they're doing it right. So that's actually the HERS rater's job, is to confirm that everything is being done right and then acknowledge it and record it. And again, it goes towards the overall HERS index. We go to the next slide. This is a slide on a gas heated home. Again, very similar in cost as well. The reason why is, again, your cost being in a municipal tends to be lower than an owner investor utility here in Massachusetts. You do see out of this one that you are not cash positive in year one, and even cash in year two. You're just over the hurdle being cash positive. The reason why that's there and why you're seeing that change is, if you go to the next slide, you'll see that the changes are similar but not great. So again, windows, you're going to a little bit more energy efficient window, but with a furnace, you're literally gaining 1% of efficiency. There are furnaces now that even have higher efficiencies than 96%, but we want to just do the bare minimum to achieve the stretch code. And so even just moving up 1 percentage point, an extra $100 makes a difference. If you have a cooling system, a central cooling system going up from a 13 SEER to a 15 SEER, which is a better system anyhow. It's a two SEERage points better than what the federal minimum is. And even at the hot water tanks, we're going from a pretty low efficiency to an okay efficiency, but not one of the greatest efficiencies you can get for a hot water tank. So again, minimal changes when you look at it. They do have costs, and I'm not minimizing those costs, but I want to point out that those costs can be recouped by energy savings. And to Neil's point, I think it is a little difficult in some municipal areas because of the fact that there is not efficiency programs. But with that being said, efficiency programs only pay a fraction of the incremental cost. They're never meant to cover the full cost. So those costs are still bared in the 280 plus communities that have adopted a stretch code. Those costs are bared by the homeowner, or that is having the home built by the builder. And again, I think one of the nice things about this is that there's a lot of support out there for the building code official in your town, and builders are being trained on this as part of their continuing education credit. So again, this is not something new to the building community. This is something they should be pretty aware of. If we move to the next slide. So I mentioned codes are always changing, and they just recently changed back in August of last year. Massachusetts adopted a new base energy code, which is the code you have today in Wakefield. There was no change to that code. It was very minimal at most. The HERS index, that target, remained the same. So HERS 55. And so the stretch code does change when the base code changes. So one of the big changes was looking at 4-story multifamily buildings will have to either follow having a HERS index, HERS rating done, or having a passive house path. Passive house, for folks that are not aware, passive house is a building standard that came out of Germany. It's getting an amazing amount of traction here in Massachusetts and across the country because it takes advantage of passive construction techniques. So the way a house sits on the lot, utilizing shading, utilizing sunlight to warm a home. So doing things that basically you can get for free, but then also making sure the performance of the house is great and it performs well. Lastly, there are some updates to the HERS index for homes that are electrically heated. There's more focus now moving to electric heat and moving away from gas heat. But with that being said, you obviously saw that you can meet the standard by doing a gas heated home. And then the last slide, if we can go to that now, there will be a future stretch code. The goal is to have a stretch code that aligns with the actual building code, so the 10th edition of the building code. The energy code that this is part of is an appendix to the state building code. So as again, things change and we adopt the next generation of codes, the stretch code will change. The effective target date of that right now is January 2022. It's still going through public review and comment here, and it will go through a lot of comment periods as it has in the past. And so the idea is that there'll be a focus on higher performance homes. But again, the thing with this is that municipalities can vote to opt out or vote to opt in, since this goes before your town council to be voted in. I believe that's how this one goes. If you decide to retain the code, there's no need to vote. Just like today, when a new code comes in, your town has to adopt it. When new stretch codes come in, the town would adopt it as well. I'm sure that's a lot of code information I just threw at you in a very short period of time, but at that, we'll stop and take some questions.
Yeah, before we take questions, I just want to, thanks, Mike. I just wanted to mention, so on that last slide on the sort of future of the code, the reason we put that there, you may be hearing about stretch code in the news because there is discussion of a higher performing stretch code that could be coming. And so the idea there is that that high performing, or some may call it like a net zero code, will initially be an opt-in, so that current stretch code communities could opt into this more accelerated code, if you will, but that as a stretch code community, you would still be in what I would just say is like your standard stretch code. And then eventually, sort of years down the road, that high performing stretch code would then become the stretch code. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to include that information, just for disclosure for you, so you understand that. And then also reiterate what Mike said, that you are able to unadopt the stretch code just as you adopt it. So if at any time the stretch code is something Wakefield doesn't feel is right for your town, then you can unadopt it. It's never happened before. Never had a municipality unadopt the stretch code, but just make you aware of that. And then last, I'll just say that those slides Mike shared, we also have similar analyses for oil and propane heated homes, where the homeowner comes out cash positive really within the first year. And also just to emphasize that those are typical examples. That's not every home is the same, but that I think gives you a good sense of what the cost difference is for the homeowner and the builder. And with that, I open it up to any questions or comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Julie, do you have anything to add? Thank you so much for that presentation. I was able to follow most of it, but it was great.
No,
Julie,
no, just thanks both, and I would open up to questions from my colleagues.
Absolutely. Jonathan.
Thank you very much for both the presentation and the clarity around it. I know last time when we talked about this, I was very confused, but certainly I'm coming away with a much better understanding. So Councillor Smith-Galvin and the presenters, thank you very much for that. Just a quick question and then a comment. On the question side, Neil, you mentioned that, one of the reasons, if you look at sort of our region, there's this kind of cluster of non-green communities in the area. And you mentioned that part of that was due to the presence of municipal utilities in a lot of these communities, because the pathway to adopting some of the green communities standards were different. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? It seemed like maybe part of it was just the lack of efficiency programs in municipal utilities, but are there other reasons why the pathway is different for towns with utilities like ours?
Yeah, sure. No, and it doesn't have to do with the efficiency offerings. It has to do with actually the legislation, the Green Communities Act, requires municipal light plants to add a renewable energy charge to their bill, and to basically join the renewable energy trust. And to join the renewable energy trust, you have to add that charge. And so that's a obstacle for most municipal light plants. The workaround is that if a community can identify investor-owned utility customers, electric customers within their town who actually pay that charge and contribute to the renewable energy trust, then we do not require that community to add that charge. And so Wakefield has identified such customers. So Wakefield does not need to add that charge, but for many municipal light plant communities who can't identify such customers, they're required to add that charge. And that is a difficult, as you can imagine, difficult thing to do to get through with the municipal light board and with residents, frankly. So that's really the major obstacle in the way for municipal light plants.
Great, thank you. That's helpful. And maybe for you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Smith-Galvin, my understanding is we did adopt, the Gas and Light Commission did adopt that charge, or am I misremembering that? No?
No, and Tom Betcher's on, but no, that charge has not been adopted, which is why when we discovered that there are a number of households served by a investor-owned utility and we would have access, we move forward.
Got it. Great, thank you. Just to close out with a comment, I'm very supportive of this. Again, appreciate walking through this in more detail than last time. I would like to see this come to town meeting, and I'm happy to have the town council support it. I think the fact that we're a little bit of an outlier now in that most of the communities in the Commonwealth have already adopted this, to me is an indication that it makes sense for us to move forward with this so that we can get the green communities designation. And also, I think, quite frankly, do so without really disrupting, homeowners and the construction industry in town, given that, as I look at it, this already is the standard that, pretty much the rest of the state is applying. And so see no reason why we shouldn't move ahead as well. Thank you.
I'm trying to fix this issues with my speakers all of a sudden. So sorry about that. Any other questions from councilors? Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie, this is directed towards you. All you're seeking right now is approval from the council to accept it as a council initiative and tonight to approve it in order to be put on the warrant, correct?
That is correct.
I fully endorse that move. I will support you 100%.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Sorry, trying to cure my problem here. Any other questions? Ed?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation as well. I think there's a lot of value in what was being presented. I guess my question is, we're only hearing, the one side of this argument, and I know, Mr. Berry, you had mentioned that there were a number of, you've heard every question or heard every statement as to why to not adopt it. I guess the issue is, I don't know that we have heard anything on the flip side of this. I mean, I feel like there must be a flip side to it, and there must be some reasons that people advance as to why this isn't a good idea. And I don't know, as a council, if we're not hearing at least the other side of the argument, if it makes a lot of sense to be fully endorsing something without that.
I think that's very fair, and I would suggest that, and we've done this with other towns, is that either have your building code or your building department either receive feedback from them or have them reach out to a neighboring community that has the stretch code and get feedback from them on their thoughts on it. Typically that is a good way to tell. I mean, it's a good way also just to kind of figure out that if you were to adopt it, some of the things that might be a challenge that maybe in year one, whether it's, you know, paperwork or just understanding how the process works, that's good to know. But it's also good to know that, you know, if there is something there that we're missing, I think anytime, you know, I'm a licensed builder. I grew up on the Cape, grew up around a lot of builders. Change isn't good, you know, with the building community. It's difficult, but the problem is that it's constantly going to happen, and it's the codes are constantly changing. Massachusetts is required by statute to adopt these new codes as they come up, and so they do make some alterations to them. They do change them, but at the end of the day, these codes are changing. I will say that, again, one of the big changes that have occurred through the years is that as a licensed builder in Massachusetts, you have to keep your license up by taking continuing education courses, of which there's a focus on the energy code and the stretch code. And I think that's helped a lot, because before, I think builders and code officials were going very blind. They didn't really have a lot to follow. And I think the training piece of this has been amazing, because I think that it helps kind of make it more makes it more understandable. But on top of that too, I think the fact that it's being more and more done, and performance path construction is part of the process, is making it a little bit more easy to understand. I can honestly tell you, in towns that have put up any concerns about adoption, or, you know, I've been to towns where it's made it to town meeting and then shot down in a town meeting forum. And I hate to say it, but the reason why it does is misinformation. Is someone gets up and says something that's not true, and then unfortunately there's nothing to stop that once it starts. And, you know, again, one of the biggest concerns about the stretch code is, if we adopt it, every home's going to have to meet the stretch code, or every project, and it's not the case. It's just new construction. And so, again, if your town has a lot of new construction happening, that might also be a concern. But if your town's not doing a lot of new construction, or the new construction that's happening, people are already building this way, then it's not a big deal. So I don't live in your town, so I don't want to downplay this. And that's why we do these informational sessions, is to give you the information to decide if this is a good fit for your town. By no means are we selling this code to you.
And I'll just say that, you know, to my colleagues, I mean, I think, you know, there's a lot of very positive things that have been presented tonight, you know, so I'm not saying that it's not a good option for us to look at. I just have a little bit of hesitation because we don't have the other side of it. And I don't know, to Mr. Berry, to your point, you know, what the direct impact is going to be to our particular community. You know, I'd be interested in hearing from our building inspector on that. I certainly don't have any issue with advancing this forward to town meeting. I mean, as a matter of right, it can be, but you know, maybe it's the attorney coming out, but there's got to be another side to this argument. You know, the arguments on both sides, and I'd like to hear both before, you know, I definitively support something. I mean, every indication is that it's the right thing to do, and the numbers as you present them seem to work very well, Mr. Duffy and Mr. Berry. So I'm not disputing it, and I'm not opposed to it per se, but I do think that it would kind of behoove us all to at least have a full understanding, having the building inspector weigh in. But there's no reason not to advance it onto town meeting. I just don't know whether the council as a whole is in a position to endorse something without hearing the other side. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Maureen.
And just to clarify, Julie's not asking us to endorse this. We are moving it to the town warrant, where we will have that debate that Councillor Dombrowski is asking for. So that's the process, right?
No, she actually said that she wanted to have the town council endorse it, and not just allow it through. So that's the distinction.
We're sponsoring the warrant, which we've done in the past, right, Julie? It's not, and then
yeah, I mean, maybe I used the wrong words. It would be the town council, having looked at this, is bringing it forward for the legislative body at town meeting to discuss and vote on. Yeah.
And so just want to clarify that point, because we've done that. We do that usually with warrants that they come from us, and then we all individually as legislative members of the voting body, we can vote. And I'm looking forward to the debate
to echo a little bit of what, what I heard, and I'm not an energy person, Neil and Mike, but what I heard was that there's a lot of grant opportunity if we do this. And so $170,000 is great money for our town to be able to apply to some of these grants going forward. And also, I'm just going to echo, Steve, in this pandemic, a lot of us have not been able to meet the new building inspector. And, it would be great to actually, have him come to a meeting and just kind of hear his thoughts.
He was at the last meeting on this.
Oh,
yeah.
That it was so late at night, I don't even remember that. So yes, I don't even remember that, but I hope at town meeting he would come and weigh in also, because I think his viewpoint would be really helpful. So just my thoughts, but yeah, I'm happy to support this to go to town meeting and further the conversation.
I'm also happy to endorse it to go to town meeting, and that's where the debate will happen. Mike, I don't know what towns you're at, but Wakefield never has misinformation at town meetings that affect votes. Never.
Oh,
Dear God. No, we do.
I had family that lived in Wakefield.
Okay, so yeah, you've been told.
Vast majority of my family's from that area. So, but it is something though. Again, it's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think to the last 2 points, I think it's really important to again do your due diligence, make sure this is a good fit. I remember way back when, and I did Lowell, and I remember going to do Lowell, and for me, for some reason, everything was pointing to the fact that this probably wasn't a good fit for Lowell. But when they adopted it, I realized after talking to the building inspector, they have very little new construction in Lowell, and what they did have was a lot of mill building conversions, and mill buildings are historic, and historic buildings don't have to comply to the stretch code, and so it wasn't a big deal for them to adopt it. And so again, I didn't even have that perspective to go with, but everything to me was like at the time, because it was such a stretch back in 2011, that it didn't seem like a good fit, but it ended up being a great fit because again, the lack of new construction and the fact that what was happening was older conversions of existing building stock. So,
yeah. I mean, I think the opportunity for grants, the fact that Melrose, it burns me that Melrose has over $1 million has received from this project. And as an attorney as well, I look at precedent and the fact that 288 cities and towns have adopted it. We would be one of the unique ones. So that makes me think that a lot of cities and towns have thoughtfully looked at this, as well as I think Ed's point about bringing in the building inspector, to talk, maybe give us input at a meeting and certainly present at town meeting. But I am happy to endorse this like we have other warrant articles that we don't necessarily, doesn't mean we're all supporting it at town meeting. Julie.
I think you said it there. Our building inspector was here last meeting and I have had conversations. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he has done this in the communities where he has come from. And Steve is shaking his head. I think the sense is that he's comfortable with this, but of course we would want to hear from him either at town meeting or before town meeting. So I would like to make a motion that we move this to a vote to put it on the town as a town meeting warrant.
Second, please. Moved by Julie, seconded by Jonathan. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Maureen?
Yes.
And Peter?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, unanimously moved for to be put on the town warrant. Thank you very much, and thank you, gentlemen, for presenting.
Thanks for having us. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great
Thank
night.
you.
Stay safe, everybody.
You as well. Item number 7, our final round of fiscal year 2022 budgets, I'm sorry. And we'll start with the Wakefield Public Schools. So am I starting with Amy or Doug? I'm sorry.
Thank you
Doug?
very much.
Yeah.
I think I can start.
Perfect.
Thank you, Ann. And to the town council, thank you very much for having us tonight. This is an abbreviated slide presentation, shorter than the presentation that we made to school committee. What you'll see removed from this presentation is a lot of the survey data that is we've taken out just to try to speed things along. I'd like to turn it over to Christine Bufagna, our school business administrator, to start off, and I will kind of pick up along with her as she's working through the presentation. Christine?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. So this is our first slide. It's our proposed school department budget. It was presented on March 9th to the school committee. We had our public hearing last week, and tomorrow night it will be presented for vote by the school committee. Next slide. We just thought it'd be a good idea to start with our budget goals for 22. It's so important to create a safe teaching and learning opportunities for all students and staff as we adjust to the changes we made due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. We fund a faculty and staff with this budget of 578 adults and 7 bargaining units to educate approximately 3,393 students in grades pre-K to 12 and post-academy. Our goal is to be driven by the WPS instructional strategy and core values. And as always, to be fiscally responsive and sustainable while acknowledging the changing demands of COVID-19. Next slide. So what are our objectives for next year? Of course, we need to address the learning loss at all grade levels due to the pandemic, which increased with increased intervention strategies and resources, which we'll talk about again in a minute. We're going to include the 5 FTEs, which were removed from last year's budget. We're going to continue to replenish PPE, supplies and materials without the one-time COVID grants that we received this year. We're going to continue preventative maintenance on our buildings in conjunction with DPW. We're going to retain 3 additional FTEs for cleaning and nursing services. Also retain 3 remote teaching positions and support the special education out-of-district costs and services. Next slide. So what does that mean? What does all that cost? So fiscal 21, we have an approved school committee budget. It was reduced last year by $400,000, which resulted in a town appropriation of $43,576,659. It's just important to point out that the budget that school committee approved was reduced by $400,000 last year. So for next year, our proposal is $45,703,200. This is an increase of 4.88%. Next slide. So what has happened in fiscal 21? We were so fortunate to receive 7 one-time COVID-19 grants from both federal and state agencies. ESSER 1 and 2, we received a school water improvement grant, the CBRF COVID relief grant, a small grant for school lunch in order to do our grab and go model, remote learning technologies that we had to apply. It was a competitive grant and we were so fortunate to receive it, and our state coronavirus prevention fund. So for the tune of $1,451,792. That's what we received this year for one-time COVID money. Next slide. So what did we spend that on? We spent it on PPE and facility updates, building maintenance and supplies. We had to have an in-depth BALA report. I don't know if you've heard about the BALA report. We had to have a vendor come in and do an in-depth study of all of our school buildings to make sure they were safe for faculty, staff, and students. We purchased screens for the windows at the high school, 140 of them, air purifiers, filters for the HVAC, storage containers. In order to socially distance, we had to remove desks and furniture from the classrooms in the schools. Remote learning, we had to hire 16 remote positions, which include 2 additional custodians, 1 nurse, teachers and paraprofessionals as well. It was about $800,000 in salaries for those 16 remote positions. COVID testing, we did 2 months worth of COVID testings for our staff. Technology resources, Zoom, Chromebooks, hotspots to do remote learning, and our daily health attestation. So staff could every morning via email or their phone say if they had any symptoms. So our total to date, because we're not done the year yet, is $739,631. Next slide. So our budget priorities, we have some knowns and we still have some unknowns. We know that we need to address the learning loss that we've had since students haven't been in school like they have in a traditional year. We need to look at extended day and summer services for intervention. Technology supports are critical to maintain our initial investments that we've made. Safety and health services, direct instruction, intervention, remote services, and counseling are now our top priorities. Our PPE with modified workspaces and cleaning routines are going to continue to be required next year. We have some unknowns. Our enrollment trends with potential loss of students. We know we've lost some students to private schools. Will they come back? What will that look like? Shortage of teachers, paraeducators, and substitutes. Right now, it's difficult to find staff for those positions. And we know we're going to need to continue remote services, but what will that actually look like and how will that impact class size and schedules?
I'll jump in here, Christine, for a minute. I just want to be clear about the term learning loss, right? So not only were we out of school for 61 days last spring, in our hybrid schedules, we have needed to prioritize our time at every level, right? Hybrid learning in all of the districts in the Middlesex League essentially mean half the number of students in school for half the amount of time. Whether you split the day in half, the week in half, or if you go every other week like some of our surrounding districts have done. And so because people have been in school half of the time, we have prioritized learning standards at every level. And so we are not teaching as many standards as we have in the past. However, there are other positives that have come kind of with the pandemic. It's like the old saying, all problems bear gifts. And so we're seeing with the smaller class sizes that students at younger grades are reading and their literacy rates are up for some, but not for others. We're seeing more pro-social behaviors at younger ages and students ready to learn. But we're also seeing a greater need for counseling services. We're seeing more isolation with some of our students. And we're also, as Christine pointed out, kind of looking at a number of our students that have transferred into homeschooling options, into private school options, and some have moved to charters. And we know that as we get back into full session, that we will get and recoup a lot of those students will be back. This is a trend that's happening statewide. On average in the state, we're looking at between 3 and 10 or 11%, depending on the district, in terms of a variation in enrollment. And so we'll also mention that in an upcoming slide because it affects our Chapter 70 dollars as well. So next slide. So as Christine pointed out, we're looking at the reinstatement of 5 positions. Those positions were cut last year. These positions were contract agreements that we've made that equal 2 FTEs for science specialists at the elementary, as well as 3 FTEs for special education, which are desperately needed at this point. The additional positions, two custodians, 1 COVID nurse, and 3 remote teachers, these are all COVID-related positions. Next slide, please. So the COVID-related positions that equal 6 FTE for FY22 come at a cost of $360,000. You could round it off to 361 or 367.85. And so we are working to fund these positions, if possible, through a federal grant for FY22 to create an offset if we can do that. Next slide. So in our proposal to school committee, we proposed a 4.88% increase over FY21. The governor's preliminary budget for Chapter 70 was $6,846,919, which was an increase over 21 of 101,520, which, we've talked about our Chapter 70 amounts and what it's increased. You can see Steve kind of talking right there. We're all not pleased with the amount, and we all believe that it should be more. One of the things that we're looking at and working with our legislative teams now is to work on adjustments for when our enrollment numbers bounce back up and how timely those dollars are going to come into the district. Next slide, please. So we're taking the long view as we try to every year, right? We try to look through wherever we might be to where we want to be. You know, this picture for us is symbolic. It's our marching band. You know, we have an award-winning marching band in our district under the direction of Tom Bankert. It's taken many, many years to kind of get to the level that they are at. They're an exemplar for other municipalities and other school districts in the state. And we're trying to take the long view as well. This year for us, we've made, during this time, we've made some significant and forged significant relationships with the town leadership, with DPW, as well as with town emergency manager Tom Walsh, our Board of Health, and you know, Steve and I don't think we've been closer in regard to our communication, but I think that has worked to our to the betterment of our schools, and certainly to the betterment of our ability to collaborate and work together to solve problems. You know, we're going to continue to kind of focus on learning ready facilities, looking through the high school, thinking long-term, maybe about Greenwood and what might happen after the construction of the high school and what might happen with Greenwood, but we're continuing to plan and to be aggressive with the preventative maintenance schedules that we've started this year. Next slide. And so that's our close. Short and to the point. Be happy to answer any questions that anyone on the council may have for us.
You're muted, Ann.
It's not, okay. Okay, now I'm good. Any members have questions for Doug? Ooh. Jonathan.
Thank you very much. And to Doug and Christine and really everyone from the school committee, thank you for being here today and presenting this. I don't envy the task that you've had this year coming up with a budget for next year in light of everything that you've already accomplished this year in terms of remote and hybrid learning. So appreciate the thought and the effort that went into the presentation tonight and also all of the work behind that. I just had a couple of questions that I wanted to ask and then just make a couple of comments. First question I wanted to ask was related to the 6 new COVID positions and thinking about sort of the long-term status of those beyond fiscal 2022. I would imagine, at least with the remote teaching positions, the idea would be that, you know, as we get out of COVID, you know, certainly beyond the next school year, that those would probably phase out. But do you have any sense as to sort of the long-term future of the custodial and nursing positions that are part of that, those 6 COVID-related roles?
Yes, Jonathan, the COVID-related positions are 1-year positions.
Okay.
Okay, we're looking to kind of keep those positions for this FY22 year.
Got it. So hopefully, and I know we're all trying to kind of predict a future that's hard to envision now, but hopefully the idea would be that sort of the extra work that we're doing in terms of building maintenance, the extra nursing time and so forth, the need for that will phase out as we get past the next school year.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Second question I just want to add, and I'm sure I asked about this last year and you presented this last year and I've forgotten, so forgive me for that. I did want to go back to the spending for Doyle for this fiscal year relative to last fiscal year. It did go up quite a bit, and I just wanted to get a reminder as to sort of what the impetus was of that increase in the current fiscal year, the 2021 budget.
Yeah.
I can speak to that, Doug. Because enrollment is down with social distancing, we had to help support. It's normally a self-sustaining program with tuitions, but the local budget had to assist with that. So you'll see for the local budget, we had to do transfers to help a couple of our revolving accounts that weren't generating the revenue that they had in non-COVID years.
Got it. So the idea would be, again, as we get out of the pandemic, as we're able to get enrollment back up to where it historically has been for Doyle, that we would see sort of a reversion to the mean, as it were.
Correct.
Yes.
Great. All right. And just the last question, and certainly, again, I know this year, with sort of all of the new things that were thrown at you, this was probably not the year to look at it, but has there been any discussion around, looking for economies of scale on the IT side between the school department and the town? And can you talk a little bit about maybe sort of what you think the future may or may not hold in that regard?
I don't know if you're have something specific in mind.
No, I know obviously there's a lot of IT spending and effort, particularly this year, that goes in the school department. And I'm just wondering if we've looked at ways to, integrate services and whether there are savings that are possible on either the school or the town side from a budgetary standpoint.
Yes, I think, one of the benefits of COVID this year has been the kind of the collaborative working relationships that I alluded to, Jonathan. And what's happening with Jeff Weiner and Todd on the town side, I think that they've worked and supported one another very, very closely. And I think that when Todd has needed support, I think, we've shared personnel, we've shared resources, and I think vice versa. We've prioritized our technology budgets with capital, right? And we've sought to kind of offset costs with the town on the town side, and to do that sequentially to best serve the town, but also to best serve the schools. So that's happening actively. I don't know if there's something more than that you might be speaking to, but I don't know that the two technology directors have ever worked more closely. Steve might be able to add something to this, but that's what I think I can share right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, Steve, you're muted.
Oh, I unmuted myself and muted myself. We are continue to work collaboratively very well. They work very closely together, and I think you're going to see more of that in a lot of different areas, some of which you really shouldn't discuss publicly.
Understood. No, thank you. Appreciate that. And it's one of those questions where you ask it knowing that it's probably already happening, just given the great work that's gone on. So appreciate that. Maybe just to close out with a comment, I really, obviously, our role as a town council is not to vote on this budget, but, certainly looking ahead to town meeting, this is something that, I, as a person who will be attending town meeting, will support. I think it's a responsible budget. I think it's a reasonable budget. And I really appreciate the forethought and the planning that went into all of that. One of the things I think that the school department does really well is tying the budget requests every year to your instructional strategy. And, you saw that play out in the presentation, but also in the larger document that was prepared. And so I really appreciate all the work that went into that. I do want to say, when we talk about budgets, and I've heard Superintendent Lyons, you talk about the fact that, you can only really budget for what you know. And certainly this last school year was unprecedented. And I think the next school year is going to bring challenges as well. And so one of the things that I think, as a town, we need to be aware of is that with those challenges may come needs as we look at fall town meeting and as we look at the next fiscal year's budget. I think in particular, the two areas that concern me, one is the social and emotional health of our students and how that manifests itself in terms of behavioral issues when we do go back to school full time. And I think the second is, as Superintendent Lyons and Ms. Wupagna referred to, we are going to see learning loss from our students. And I think it's important to recognize that learning loss is not going to be equally shared. There are students in town that have done pretty well in the hybrid model, and are fortunate in cases to have the parental resources and the support to allow them to do that. But certainly that's not shared across the board. And I do worry about the impact to our English language learners, to our students on special education plans, and others that maybe haven't had the level of parental support that ideally all of our kids would have. And so I put that out there as sort of a plea for all of us to be aware that, this is a good, responsible budget that, I think gets us to where we need to be given what we know today. But things will emerge differently than we might expect. I think there's no doubt about that. And I want to make sure that we're all prepared to have those discussions around social and emotional health, around equity, when and if the time comes, so that we're doing the right thing for our kids here in Wakefield. So with that, I'll stop talking, and again, just want to close out and express my appreciation to the school committee and the school administration for all the great work that you've done this year.
Thanks, Jonathan. Amy, before I get to you, I had forgotten to reach out to Jim Sullivan, who is the chair of FinCom and liaison to the schools. So Jim, if you wanted to comment on the budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't know if Gerard was on or not this evening, but we met several times. I didn't see Gerard on. We met several times with the team, with Doug and Christine, and I agreed, basically with what was just said by Jonathan. I think it's a relatively prudent budget. We're happy to understand that some of the COVID-related things will get possibly covered by some federal offsets and be a one-year thing for now. Also happy that we're reinstating the 5 positions from the previous term of the contract. That was a hard pill to swallow for the school, so to speak, and the union, absorbed that as well. So in general, those are some of my thoughts from the subcommittee meeting. So thank you for the opportunity.
Great, Jim, thanks so much. Amy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I would just like to echo some of the comments that Jonathan had. I completely agree with you, Jonathan. We have some issues that we certainly need to address that, I have no doubt that Superintendent Lyons and his executive team are working on now and will continue to move ahead and work on them. And I just want to take this time to thank Superintendent Lyons and Christine for all their hard work and dedication this past year. This budget process goes back many months, right, where there's so much planning and so much collaboration, between Doug's executive team and, of course, the Finance and Facilities Subcommittee, and, the collaboration that we do have with the FinCom as well. So lots of really important work that is done very thoroughly. And, I just fully support this budget at 4.88%. I think it's very fiscally responsible, and, to be able to come in at 4.88% and also get 11 positions that are desperately needed, I think is a really great thing for us. Looking back a year ago, I wasn't really sure what was going to happen, so I'm just thrilled to be able to, support a budget at 4.88% and know that it also has 11 additional positions that will benefit our students directly. So thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Any other members from Town Council have any comments or? Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the school committee, Superintendent Lyons, Christine as well. I know this is an effort that is many months in the making. So Superintendent Lyons, with the 6 positions that you said were COVID related, you said they were for a year. The expectation is that they are going to be reimbursed through federal money. Is that right?
That's our hope. Yes, sir.
Okay. And then after that 1 year, then those positions will be extinguished. Is that correct? Or will it be a year from now coming back and saying that there's still a need for them?
I don't know what COVID will bring a year from now, but we certainly hope not.
But if it's not COVID related, though, I mean, these are not positions you're looking to keep going forward.
That's correct.
Okay. And looking at the budget too, are there any other opportunities we have to take advantage of all the talk that we're hearing about the federal, the federal funding being available for schools in the next couple years or next few years? And are any of those dollars able to be used as offsets for what we're looking at here under the budget you've presented?
So we are anticipating the stimulus money that may be coming, Ed, to kind of help us with intervention services, both in the area of counseling and support that students need outside of the school day. We've already started a spring literacy intervention model. We will have an intervention model for the summer, right? So we're looking at additional supports for regular ed and for special ed students in the area of literacy, math, and counseling for the next 18 to 36 months. So the additional monies that are coming in, we are prioritizing those funds to support those efforts. And so that's primarily what we're looking at right now and prioritizing.
And do you have any sense of what sort of formula or criteria would be used to determine or project what Wakefield's share of that would be?
I think our ESSER amounts are going to be 2 times or 2.2 the last amount that was provided is what we're hearing. So, and that's based on a Title I formula. Our Title I budget was cut by 50% 3 years ago. So our Title I dollars are on scale with the increase we got with SOA. So our Title I dollars are $100,000. So it's not, so if we get another $200,000 or $250,000 in regard to intervention services, those dollars go very quickly to provide services in the summer or outside of the school day, which is what we're trying to do. So yes, that's the best information I have right now, Ed.
Right. And I do think, just looking at this budget too and the increase, it just goes to underscore when you look at the budget in total, how much of it, the percentage increase or how much of the budget generally is driven by the contractual obligations, the negotiated agreements with the various unions, because everything else is kind of on the fringes, candidly. That is by far what drives this budget and what ultimately then drives and locks us in with a certain threshold percentage or a floor that's going, or a basement of each year we're going to have X percent. That's really what drives it more than anything. So, I just, I think those who had worked on that negotiation, but I think it continues to be, from a taxpayer perspective, but really the driver, more than anything else in this entire town's budget of over $100 million at this point. It's whatever is negotiated with those union contracts that is going to drive, costs for the town probably more than anything. So it's so incredibly crucial, the work that you're doing in that regard. And I know it was a bit of a laborious process recently, but I'll just say that it does make a difference. And I just ask you to never lose sight of that, because anything else that we talk about here tonight is really secondary to what those negotiations yield. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from town councilors? All right. Seeing none, I want to thank you, Doug and Christine and Amy. I agree with what everyone said. It's a thoughtful budget, and I appreciate what Ed says, but I remember the days of Wakefield when we paid our teachers like 10 cents on the dollar, and we lost good teachers and we could not keep them, and we were really low in Middlesex County. I feel much better about the strength of our educators now, and I think that's so important as the daughter of a public school teacher. But what you've done, Amy kept mentioning it, the 4.88% is just amazing in times of COVID. So thank you for your efforts, Finance Committee for working with it, and all of the school committee. So I think we're wrapped up with the school budget. We don't vote on this. This is just a presentation to us. So thank you all, and good luck with in-person. A lot of in-person coming in the near future. Knock on wood that it goes well. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Moving to the next budget, which is the Northeast Voc budget. Kevin, I'll send this to you first.
Yes, the vocational, thank you, Madam Chair. The vocational school budget, we're recommending an increase in fiscal 22 of $335,115. This increase breaks down The Northeast Regional line item has increased $301,074. We're anticipating 18 additional students there next year. The Minuteman Regional line item has increased $6,366. We had one student there last year. We're budgeting one student there again next year. The Minuteman Regional is now charging a capital fee per student of approximately $6,000. So that makes up the majority of that increase. The Essex North, formerly the Essex Aggie Regional School, has increased $27,675. We had 6 students there, or we budgeted 6 students there in fiscal 21. We're budgeting 7 students there in fiscal 22. And actually in fiscal 21, we had 9 students. So there were 3 additional students there in fiscal 21 than we had budgeted. So we will be looking for a reserve fund transfer to close out that account later this year. It's tough because we tried to predict this budget. We actually don't know how many students we're going to have at Minuteman and Essex North until later in the year, probably closer to July or August before they finalize some of their numbers. The total budget request for fiscal 22 for the vocational school budget is $1,909,388. And I do want to mention we have Mr. Dabari and Jay Pacone from the Northeast Regional here to give us an overview on their budget and also an update on their new school project.
Thank you, Kevin. Superintendent Dabari, if you want to start out.
Yeah, actually, we also have Brittany Carosella, our Wakefield representative here, and I have Dr. Carla Scazzarella, my principal. So if I could turn it over to Brittany and then maybe come back around to me.
Certainly, sounds great. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to the Town Council for having me tonight. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself as the new Wakefield School Committee member at Northeast. A little bit about myself. I'm a lifelong resident of Wakefield. I attended Wakefield High and graduated from UMass Amherst. Previously, I spent several years working as legislative aide at the State House, and I currently work as a realtor for Sotheby's in Boston, and I look forward to serving on the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany.
Great.
And your name is quite associated with the Voc. Was your dad on? Am I remembering?
Yes,
your
it
dad,
is.
right. Your dad was on it.
My grandfather.
Oh, your
My
grandfather.
grandfather.
Okay, no, that's great. That's great.
Yep. My grandfather, yep.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great. So before I introduce our budget information, I just wanted to, again, thank you all for having us here. Our first meeting in Wakefield was supposed to be last March, but we all know how that ended up. So this should have been our second year. So we all dealt with the same challenges. I'm sure listening to the Wakefield budget really rang true on how much we're all in this together and how much we have in common. We do like to refer to ourselves as Wakefield's other high school. And we say that to our other districts as well, because we are a public school. Northeast was formed from a group of cities and towns who got together and voluntarily joined part of Northeast in a way to save money by regionalizing, which is very unlike, as you know, a charter school situation. So we feel that, you know, we are always connected. However, in the past decade or so, I felt like we really strengthened our relationships with Wakefield. And I think that's been a great thing for both our district and the town of Wakefield. We have a Wakefield school resource officer now, who's a great connection to the town and to the police. Chief Smith was just really an integral part of that relationship. And I know Chief Scory is really involved as well. Most recently, being involved with the DPH has been a big help, and, you know, helping us get through some of these COVID situations. We really, we're heavy hanging on your DPH, and it's been a great thing. The fire department, Chief Sullivan, he worked with us after we had a fire at Northeast, and he made that process so much easier. And, more recently, Doug Lyons, who I had known prior to coming over to Wakefield, we've had many conversations on a lot of different issues that affect both of our school districts. So that's been a fabulous relationship. And of course, Mr. Mayo, who worked with my prior administration to make sure that there was improved communication between Northeast and between Wakefield, and that they were able to break down some barriers from decades ago when there wasn't a great line of communication. So this has been great for us. Most importantly, we have always opened our doors to the town of Wakefield, from recently, allowing COVID testing for Wakefield to happen at Northeast, to opening up our building for emergency services, for trainings, most recently allowing us to use athletic fields because we do not have a turf field in this difficult fall 2 season, and even to us loaning Wakefield High School our stage for a graduation that we all tried to pull together. So I really feel great about this relationship. I did hear some comments at the beginning, which I was very glad to actually be here for, and that's about communication with our school building project. And I wasn't prepared tonight to address that project. It's still not even approved, but there will be a lot more conversations going forward. However, I want to mention a few things. Our first press release was over 4 years ago, and that was printed in the Wakefield papers, and it was also printed in the Lynn Item in different things. And since that point, we've had 8 articles describing where we are with our building project. We've done everything we can to be extremely transparent. It has been challenging during COVID, where usually we go on sort of tour to the different places in person, but because of some of the things we all dealt with in this past year, it has been hindered a little bit, but we are picking up and we're going to even go stronger. We have a website that all of our minutes, all of our plans, everything is public. And today we met with our OPM and we approved a Facebook account that will also have up-to-date information on our projects. So we do want to be transparent, and more importantly, we do look at the concerns of the community. All of the issues, as was mentioned by one of you tonight, are addressed through the MSBA, that we can't just throw a building up with all of the environmental impact studies, with all of the traffic. Everything is going to be addressed. I have my fingers crossed that we are accepted, because we are not officially a project yet. So I wanted to put that out there. The other piece that, we've shared is there's been some misunderstanding about where the road is going to be. So as part of the plans, Northeast plans on funding a second road to leave Northeast and not have to use Hemlock Road. The sole purpose of that is to improve the traffic situation in Wakefield. It gives Northeast no other, positive attribute other than helping the neighbors in the traffic. However, the road is not the road that is very close to the homes off of Water Street and off of, off of Farm Street. It's actually a road that most likely, when we do some of the surveying, actually ends up in Saugus. So it's that far down to the power lines. I don't have an exact distance. I'm sure any of us can drive from the power lines to the first house, but it is a significant distance that we anticipate would not cause, some of the daily disturbances once the school is built. We work daily on finding ways to minimize the amount of ledge that might be impacted. So in the past week, we've actually removed from the plans a road that would require us to tear down more trees and to break up some of the ledge into an actual footpath that's going to wind through some of the area. So we are very cognizant and we are taking it very serious that people will be impacted, and we want to minimize that, and we want to really be as transparent as possible. Before I turn it over to Mr. Bacon, I'd also like to add that Mr. Mayo has been on our building committee since before we even had a committee. Mr. Roberto, prior to his retirement, was also on that committee. And this goes back 5 years. So this goes back to a pre-feasibility. So we hear what the neighborhood is saying, and we hear what the town is saying, and we will respond to those as we get closer to the project. So if I could turn it over so we can get some of the budget information across to you, and I know that's why we're here, but I did want to address those since they did come up during public participation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Jay?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jay Pacone. I'm the Director of Finance for Northeast Metro Tech, and I'm just going to talk to you a little bit tonight about our budget processes and how we go about putting together our budgets on an annual basis. So when the superintendent and I get together and we develop our budgets on an annual basis, we typically have 2 goals in mind, and in this year we have 3 goals in mind. First and foremost, we always want to minimize the financial impact to our member communities. And we understand that our member communities such as Wakefield have significant financial constraints that they have on an annual basis. They are under the guise of Prop 2.5, how much money they can raise via taxation. So we understand that anything that, any assessment increase that would be large would be problematic for them to cover. Plus you have other departments that you need to cover as well. And we're very cognizant when we develop our budgets about that. And secondly, we want to add provide an adequate level of funding to support student learning and foster educational excellence. Mr. DeBarry said it perfectly. We do consider ourselves Wakefield's other school, and we want to be an excellent school, and we want to be able to provide the education that Wakefield would be proud to send their kids to our school. And thirdly, we need to allocate the additional funds provided by the Student Opportunity Act to best meet our student needs. In this budget, I'm sure Wakefield Public Schools talked about it. The Student Opportunity Act was put back into play. It was cut out of the FY21 budget allocation or Chapter 70 allocation. In the FY22, they're reinstating that. So we have to figure out how we can best meet student needs with that funding. So as Mr. DeBarry again said, regionalization exists by definition to offer services that are to reduce costs to our member communities. So when we set out to create our budgets, we always want to keep our assessments at or below a 3% increase. I am happy to report that we were actually able to keep the assessment at an exact 3% increase, which I will say is a little bit higher than we normally come in with. But there's some pretty good reasons for that, and I'll get into that in terms of our Chapter 70 funding. We like Wakefield Public Schools, had a significant cut in Chapter 70 funding in FY21. When the first budget was approved, we were projected to receive over $1.1 million in Chapter 70 funds. When the budget was revised, we had to cut $780,000 out of that budget in order to fund just our regular positions. And we were able to do so without cutting positions, which was great. But I will say that even though there was a slight uptick of Chapter 70 funding this year, in FY22, we're projected to receive approximately $450,000 more. Still doesn't come to the original pre-COVID FY21 allocation that we were supposed to receive. And the problem with only receiving $450,000 is that the Student Opportunity Act positions, which we're required to fund in this round of funding, is those positions equate to around $450,000 that we had to add in. So although we received $450,000, we didn't have any additional funds to fund our regular contractual obligations. So we had to get pretty creative in this budget. So knowing that we may have some revenue shortages, we started planning early in FY20 to try to build up our excess and deficiency funds, which are basically a free cash account on the city side, city or town side. You would refer to it as free cash. So our excess and deficiency funds, anything over 5%, we are not allowed to carry. We have to use as an offset to reduce member assessments in the next fiscal year. And we were able to utilize that strategy very well because we did have a cut in that revenue. So I will say that that offset provided a great deal of help to us in order to make sure that we kept the assessments low, and in order to make sure that we were responsible to the member communities, being able to use this entire offset. So I will say that we have other fiscal challenges within this budget. We had to fund our regular contractual obligations. We actually have bargaining groups that are out of contract right now, so we had to put money into the budget in order to fund enough funding in order to get a ratification on the collective bargaining agreement for all of our union contracts. And then we also have funding in there for other post-employment benefits, OPEB. We have a $71 million liability, and we need to start adequately funding that, even though it's probably going to be impossible, but we have to put our best effort in order to fund it. So I think Steve, I think Steve shared with you the budget document that I sent over. I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
So I'll talk about the majority of our budget request is our salary request. It comes again from the 5 positions related to the Student Opportunity Act that we added in, which include a library media specialist, because library media specialist, it would be a very crucial position, especially with the fact that with remote learning, it's a very important position to have. They really take the reins when it comes to making sure kids are set up, and should we ever run into a situation like again, we'll have somebody who has the technical expertise to be able to handle such a situation. Addition of a data coordinator. So our data coordinator basically would be somebody who takes all our student data and compiles it, puts it together. Other districts do have this position. I think if you look around in other districts, they have this position. It's crucial to our state funding. Really, it's important to have clean data, because when you don't have clean data, then that can really hurt your financial situation. And if you don't produce the correct data, you can certainly you could find yourself in a financial trouble. Addition of a robotics teacher, that's basically due to the popularity of the class. Addition of foreign language teacher for enrollment purposes, and addition of a carpentry teacher, again for enrollment purposes. And then additionally, we had to add an auto body teacher again for because the shop has become more popular. And then we also had to add or put a robotics teacher. We had to move them from a grant, which we normally fund this position through the Perkins grant. The Perkins grant is requiring us to phase out those positions and put them into the budget. You can only carry them for 3 years. So once the 3 years is up, we have to start to phase them into the actual budget. We still have one in the Perkins grant, but we'll be phasing that out next year. And then we have salary savings of 122,118 based on people who are retiring, or teachers who are retiring at a higher rate. And we use that money to offset any salary increases that we experience. So the total highlighted expenses for salary is 1,221,891. So those that would be the majority of our increase. And the one decrease that we would have of note that's notable is a reduction in our capital expense for building project. We had $1.6 million in our capital expense line this year. Next year, we're projecting a $1.5 million in that. So we reduced it by 100,000. And then we also reduced some miscellaneous contracted service expenses in certain lines based on historical information that we deemed that we didn't have to budget as much in certain lines. So all told, our total budget is going up 3.82%, total operating budget, which is a change of $1,099,949. But of that $1,999,949, we're using an additional amount of revenue of $649,763 from our excess and deficiency account, from our capital accounts, and our transportation reimbursement account. And all told, the total assessment increase is $450,186. That's the total assessment. That's not to Wakefield. Wakefield's FY22 assessment is $1,732,232, which is an increase of $301,074. And most of that can be all of it can be attributed to the fact that there's 18 more students that are attending our school from Wakefield. And then also we have some communities, our larger communities, such as Chelsea and Revere, their enrollment went down. And what happens there is that Wakefield becomes a larger percentage of our total population. And so shared costs, Wakefield has a larger percentage of total shared costs. So that causes the assessment to increase slightly as well. However, we were able to reduce the assessment based on the fact that we used that large offset in order to reduce the assessments to a favorable level. So that's my information. If anybody has any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions from members of the council? No. Ed, and then Jonathan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this presentation. It's very helpful. I was really encouraged to see that our Wakefield enrollment was up by 18, and I was just interested, both kind of short term and long term. What is the collaboration like between the Voc and Wakefield Public Schools to try to identify, students that would be, a great fit for the many opportunities that present themselves at the school? I feel like, there's so many great paths forward, in so many different trades. And if you could also talk about just like the long-term planning. I think if I understand correctly, the new facility, the new school will actually be able to accommodate a much larger enrollment. And I'm encouraged by that because I think there are a lot of students within our community that would find very fulfilling opportunities at the Voc and then be on a really solid career path going forward. So could you maybe just explain to us a little bit what you're doing currently in conjunction with Wakefield Public Schools and how you see that perhaps expanding in the years to come?
Yep. So we really rely on the middle school guidance counselors and administration to work with us. So every year we have a counselor's breakfast, and we bring all the counselors up from all the middle schools that attend our district. And we put on a presentation on how best to fill out the application, how best to, get the word out about Northeast. We also hired a new recruitment coordinator last year. His name's DeJuan, and he's amazing. He's just a guy with a lot of positive energy. And he actually goes to the middle schools and puts on a presentation for all of the 8th grade and some schools, the 7th and 8th grades, and does a question and answer type of situation. But we're always trying to improve that. Most recently, one thing I'm going to actually ask Dr. Scazzarella to explain a little bit is we got a grant from the Cummings property, and we're able to bring high school students in who don't attend Northeast. Carla, can you talk a bit about the outreach of that program and how we're trying to work with towns like Wakefield to bring even more students into vocational education?
Sure, thank you. And thank you for having us this evening. We were very fortunate to get a grant for $100,000 from the Cummings properties that we spread over 4 years. This is now our 4th year of the grant. And the grant was to support students from our 12 districts who don't come to Northeast Metro Tech, but would like an opportunity to sort of test out some interests they may have in any of our shop areas. So it's on Saturdays. It generally starts in early January and runs into April. We do 3 sessions, 4 Saturdays each. The kids come in for 4 hours, and we have usually probably between 8 to 10 of our shops that run each of those sessions to give the students an opportunity to. It actually is what we would call an exploratory program, which is what our 9th graders do over the course of 3/4 of the year. So it gives them a little taste. We also have a career counselor who helps these non-Northeast students look at potential career paths, look at different jobs that connect with those career paths. In our first year, 4 years ago, I think we had a total of 25 students. We're up over 150 students now that come in on these Saturdays, and just get a feel for things they don't get an opportunity to see in their more traditional high schools. And we've had a wonderful relationship, particularly with Wakefield, because these are the high schools we're working with, not the middle schools for this program. And, you know, we've got kids coming in, they get an opportunity to see possible career paths that connect to their programs at their own high schools. We had a student a couple of years ago from Reading who came in and really was interested in our design and visual program, which does a lot of graphic arts and a lot of architectural types of programs. And the student liked it so much that came to all 3 sessions and then said, "This is my major for college when I leave high school." So we feel good about that. And this is our way of really connecting with the other communities and supporting the more traditional public high schools with their high focus on academics, with an opportunity for students who might have an interest you know, in things like robotics or culinary arts. We've had a number of students come in and try out health assisting, which helps if you think you might like to be in the medical profession. It's been very great for everyone involved. And I'm actually waiting to hear from Cummings for a sort of a redo of the grant we put in for it again, and also for it to be sustained for 10 years. Because we feel this program is really successful and helps us really connect with all of our high schools in our community. Like Dave said, we do consider ourselves the other high school in each of these districts. We're your other public high school, and this is just one of those things we can offer to kids for free. They just have to get themselves to Northeast.
Thanks, Carla.
Thank you for that. I look at the school, and there are just so many opportunities there, and also I know the course offerings, you know, areas to explore. There's just, you know, like you said, robotics and technology, and so many different ways that I think it's still the schools, I think, is very much underappreciated. And I feel like the more the community is able to recognize that is a very important path forward to, to many different students, I think, the better off our community is as a whole, because it's a real asset that I think is again, somewhat underappreciated right now. And so I'm glad to hear about that outreach. And I would just encourage, to the extent you can continue to do that. And obviously the synergy that you're talking about with the high school students is great, certainly. But I just, those middle schoolers, just being aware that that's an option going forward, I think is something that's so important. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Jonathan, did you have a comment or question?
I'm actually all set. Already answered my question in the last set of comments, so thank you.
Great. Any other members of the council? And I have, thank you so much. And I think Paul Donaco and I are the only two counselors who remember several years ago when it wasn't your presentation, by the way, I want to be very clear. Prior presentations were not very complete and robust, and there was a feeling that was so different since you've taken over. So I really appreciate that. I just have one question, and if it needs a longer conversation, we can talk offline, but I don't get this sense about your school, but in reading that, the Globe, there was an article that talked about how some students were being not as academically welcomed in vocational schools as they traditionally were. And I never get that sense from your school that that's the case, even though you strive for excellence.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and it's been a topic that I've had to, bite my tongue on a little bit, because I know it's more than there's an agenda to it.
Sure.
So when I had first heard that rumblings from, some of the inner city schools, and it actually started on the South Shore. Mm-hmm. And, some of the South Shore groups kind of just started reaching out to all of the nonprofits saying, hey, will you support us on, this situation? So one of our inner city cities had made some similar comments, and we jumped in, my SUV, Carla and I, and our recruitment coordinator and our administrator of admissions, and we brought the data down, and we said, well, first of all, Northeast only competes within your own city and town. So somebody from, Malden or Revere isn't being bumped out from somebody from Winchester. Each town's allotted slots. So I said, that's number one. I said, number two is we pulled the demographics, and every single student that's coming from your city falls in a minority status. So mathematically, how could we ever improve our diversity in our fairness to your particular city? And they were stumped. They thanked us because they had some misinformation, and we were all set. We actually had our admissions coordinator go to the nonprofit and work out of their office trying to recruit kids from the city. So we felt great about it. And then I opened the newspaper Saturday, and there it was. And it was sad to know that the reality of the data means nothing when there's a bigger agenda. And I know that agenda is something that's very important and very serious. So I backpedaled a little bit and said, okay, I'm not going to personalize this on behalf of Northeast, but it is the furthest from the truth. And, I challenged them that I could demonstrate that in front of any organization. And then they were quoted in the newspaper anyway. And I can't explain it. I wish I could.
No, thank you so much for addressing that.
And I would like to, Mr. Donaco, it's been many years, but I did recognize the name and face. I won't say how long ago.
My son's a product of the vocational school, if you remember.
I remember him well. I do.
Yes,
Electrical, I believe.
You'll be proud of him right now. He's a foreman in New York. He's working at Mount Sinai Hospital.
Now he was an
electrician.
Electrician, right? I remember. So great. Tell him I said hello. Hopefully he remembers me as a
I will
teacher.
do so,
That's
sir.
how
Thank
long
you.
ago it was.
Great presentation tonight.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dave. I just wanted to give you a chance to explain that because my experience with the Voc, you know, for years is that you folks are doing what you should be doing.
Thank you.
So seeing no other comments or questions, I just want to make sure my numbers are right with regard to what we're voting to approve as the budget. $1,909,388.
Correct.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. So could I please have a motion and a second to approve the Northeast Vocational School budget for $1,909,388?
So moved.
Moved by Paul.
Second.
Seconded by Julie. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie.
Yes.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Ed. Yes. Okay. Maureen.
Yes.
And Peter.
Yes.
Excellent. And I keep calling it my age, Northeast Vocational School, Northeast Metro.
Yep, Metro Tech. Yep.
Metro Tech. I'm so sorry. Townie here. So I'm going back to my roots. But thank you so much for your presentation as well. And good luck with this, all the work you're doing in this coming school year.
Great. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a good night. All right, moving on to our health insurance budget. Kevin.
Yes, the group health insurance budget, we are requesting an increase of $638,987 over fiscal 21. In the tax levy portion of the budget, the increase is $523,083. Of that, $10,753 is in the personal services line item, which is for contractual and negotiated increases. I did decrease the town's tax levy portion of the appropriation by $200,000 based on a fiscal 21 surplus that we're planning to have in that account. So we were able to, when we got the rates for next year, we factored, projected those out and came up with a number. We reduced that number by $200,000 based on a surplus that we have in the budget this year. There's an increase in the transfer from the enterprise funds totaling $115,904 over last year. I also want to point out this budget includes $1,675,000 contribution to the town's OPEB liability account. At the end of fiscal 20, we had in that account approximately $18.4 million. The total budget request for fiscal 22 is $14,284,954, with $12,259,042 coming from tax levy, $409,257 from the water enterprise, $283,177 coming from the sewer enterprise, and $1,333,478 coming from the gas and light enterprise.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Steve, do you want to make any comments before we go to Don from FinCom? Oh, mute.
Let me unmute. Okay. Yeah, this budget, again, we're in the GIC and we're still in there. And unfortunately, their rates went up a little bit over 4% this year, which I guess is maybe indicative of what's going on in the healthcare industry. But I am very happy with how this budget came out. I feel very confident with the $200,000 that Kevin said he cut out of it. And I think they blamed me last time. So Kevin, thank you for taking the hit. Because what will happen is our very capable staff will go through open enrollment. And I think that Amy Forziati is still on the call. She can maybe answer some questions. And they will help our employees pick lower cost plans, which will also help us lower this amount. So I'm very confident that will happen. And I think one thing that, we do need to point out is that this budget again will probably return around $500,000 to the general fund by the end of the year. So we're very confident going forward. Open enrollment doesn't start until after we have voted and we'll extend through town meeting. So we feel good about it. Amy and Karen do a great job and there's a great trust and synergy among the employees. So this is a budget that used to give us a lot of angst 10 years ago, but right now we feel pretty confident. And to have that amount in OPEB and to continue funding that is quite a testament to the work that Kevin and Amy do on this. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Steve. I don't see Amy on here, but I might be missing her. But if not, Don Ravenel from FinCom, do you want to chat about the budget?
Sure. Thank you, Ann. Yes, so the GIC subcommittee of FinCom celebrated St. Patrick's Day by reviewing the GIC budget. And we were, Kevin and Steve covered pretty much the highlights of the budget. We felt positive about the budget request for FY22. And we're particularly pleased that once again, 1.675 million is going to be funding OPEB.
Great, thank you so much. Do any members of the council have questions for Steve or Don? Jonathan.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Mr. Mayor, you can remind me of this. The town's contribution to, so the town versus the employee's contribution to each benefit plan, is that dictated by the GIC or is that something that we set?
We negotiate that. It's 80-20, and then for some plans 75-20 for another. Now, I don't know if it used to be 90-10 years ago. We brought it down.
Yeah.
Kevin, do you know if that's a GIC directive? I don't believe it is. No, no, it's
I
us.
don't believe so.
It's us. Yeah.
Okay. Great. No, thank you. Appreciate that. Just wanted some clarification on that.
Any other questions from members of the council? All right, seeing none, I need a motion, please, and a second to approve the health insurance budget of $14,284,954.
Moved.
Moved by Paul, seconded by
Second.
Jonathan. Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
And Maureen?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. That budget passed unanimously. Moving on to our final budget, the cable television public access enterprise. Steve, I think I send this to you.
No, you send it to Kevin.
Oh, Kevin, I'm Kevin first. Sorry. Of course.
The Cable Public Access Enterprise Fund for fiscal 22, we are actually looking for a decrease of 25,881 over the current fiscal year. This was a new budget last year due to a requirement by the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. Wanted all the communities handling cable money the same way. This budget is funded by receipts received from our cable providers, which include Verizon, Comcast, and RCN. I've worked very closely with Ryan Boyd and his crew over at WCAT coming up with this budget. This budget is based on both prior, current year, and estimated revenues. And that's how this budget is funded, through the revenues from those providers. The personal services amount for this budget is $158,533. And that money is used for salaries at the Wakefield High School for 2 teachers in the media department. Under the contractual services, there's an amount of $367,706, which is used for payments to WCAT, which is a 503C that was set up to provide the paid cable access for the town. There was a capital amount of $25,000, which is split 1/3 for the Wakefield Public Schools, 2/3 for WCAT, which is based on the number of channels that each of those control. Total budget request for fiscal 22 is $551,239.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. I don't think we have a second on this, Steve. Or
well, you have a minute. Yeah, if I could say a couple of
Sure.
and I think that you know, the WCAT has done and
Right.
continue to do such a fabulous job, and really, we really have to thank them for covering everything. You know, a lot of people are able to view our meetings, all other committee meetings, and they've really been a great partner. And this was shown maybe even more through COVID than before. I do think that we have to think about this budget going forward, because as you note, less people are subscribing to cable TV, which means that the revenues that come in are going down. You know, hence you did see a reduction in this budget this year because of that. And I think they've been averaging the last few years, you know, 4 or 5% a year. So after you get there through a few years, you're looking at, you know, last 2 years losing, you know, budget being decreased by 11% of income coming in. So I think we have to look at that and to see what we can do as a community to help continue to support cable TV. They've done a great job, and you know, we may need to come back and see what we can do in the years to come, and just kind of, you know, giving everybody a little bit of heads up that this is something that may be coming down the pike. But they've done a fabulous job with a very small staff and are covering everything, including the sporting events, which a lot of parents have, you know, without being able to go see their kids play. I mean, this has been their lifeline. So that's another big part of it that they're picking up the slack on. And, you know, there'll be some discussions on this over the next few years, I'm sure.
Thank you, Steve. Ryan, do you want to add anything?
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity and for the kind words. It is truly appreciated. As you mentioned, you know, we do have a small staff. We do work extremely hard to make sure that we are always here to cover what we can, when we can, and however we can. And you know, we remain steadfast in that commitment to the town. And you know, we love what we do, and we just, you know, are looking forward to certainly a bright future as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ryan. We love what you do too. So thank you. Julie. And then Ed.
Well, and I was going to say the exact same things that Steve said. Certainly, they have gone above and beyond during COVID, and I really see, even as we come out of COVID, we really, you know, we need to plan what's going to happen going forward. But I believe there will continue to be a really big and important role for WCAT, and so I definitely see that in the future. We're going to have to think about how. I just got off of the board of WCAT after spending 3 years there. They're definitely going to be decreasing cable revenues, juxtapose that against increasing demand. So I'll leave it there for now.
Thanks, Julie. Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with Vice Chair Smith-Galvin. I think WCAT has done a tremendous job during COVID, and I see nothing but further engagement with them as we, I mean, I don't see a time where we're not going to have meetings that are not recorded going forward. And I think WCAT has done a great job also being able to pivot online. I mean, I think as many people, actually far more people end up probably streaming us and watching us on Facebook Live or otherwise online than they do even on the cable station itself. So I think that the value add there is just going to continue to be significant. I would really like to see what kind of opportunities we could have on the high school side of things. I know that Kevin had mentioned about those two media positions. I'd like to see how we could better, you know, make use of those opportunities and utilize that. And if anyone, you know, wants to be critical of WCAT, you certainly don't want to do it when WCAT is broadcasting your meeting, because they just pull that plug in the control room and forget it. It all goes black on us. So I thank them for what they've done, and I think they have a great role to play going forward for our community. Thanks.
Thanks, Ed. Any further questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I need a motion and a second to approve the WCAT's budget for $551,239.
So moved.
Moved by Ed.
Second.
Seconded by Julie. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie.
Yes.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
Ed.
Aye.
and Maureen.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Unanimously approved. So that does it for budgets. All right, we're good. Thank you all for coming who worked on all of the budgets. And thank you, Kevin, for making it so seamless once again.
Thank you, please.
Item number 8, fiscal year 2022 capital. I know we have someone we have Frank.
Frank
Am I
Leon.
remembering that?
Yes.
Yes. All right, Frank Leon, you can take it. Oh, unmute.
There should be a PowerPoint.
Sound better?
too. Yeah.
They're perfect.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
So I'm bringing the PowerPoint up right now.
Yep.
Do we have the presentation going up?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, folks, basically the same committee as we had last year with one addition. We got myself, Dan, David, Phil, Tracy. Jeff Genta joined last year as an associate member because we wanted to keep an odd amount of voting members. Next page. Obviously, recap each fall, the town departments submit requests to the DPW director and the CPC for consideration. Requests are compiled into a spreadsheet, which we evaluate and review. Initial tax request this year was $6,590,926. The water was $250 and the sewer was $170. Beginning in February of each year, the CPC invites all interested department heads to the meeting for discussion on the requests. The CPC evaluates those requests and establishes a rank and prioritization for the funding. We work to explore all potential options and efficiency and savings and establish a yearly plan to meet the town budget expense, which has been around $2 million. Next page, please. This year, a couple of highlight items. With the police are going to just get the 3 cruisers. Last year, obviously, we went down to 1 because of the budget cut in half, and we were happy that all he needed this year was the 3. He didn't have to go over that. Another sidewalk snow blower, mainly to help with the schools in the Galvin. It's a little more complicated with all the sidewalk areas there. The Toro gang mower is the DPW's big gun that does most of their work on their big fields. Next slide, please. The Hartshorn house needs a roof replacement. Unfortunately, it's made out of wood shingles and it's one of those pricey ones. So we have some money going towards that. Boiler replacement at the senior center. They're on their last legs. If I remember correctly, there's actually 4 older burners running right now. Not that they're all running, but they can be replaced with two new efficient burners, and it'll take care of the whole center. And then window replacement at the Greenwood Fire Station. We replaced their boiler last year, so we might as well give them some windows to keep the heat in. Next slide. The $150,000 towards a town-wide ADA accessibility and transition plan. $62,500 for a fire department portable radio upgrade. We actually recommended and we gave last year the first half of that. So this will actually replace all of their radios and have them all brand new and all working all the time. I think they're usually on a 10-year plan, if I remember that correctly. So hopefully these will last them a while longer and not, make it through it. The Woodville Playground replacement, $140,000. We had talked a couple of years ago about doing a playground a year because of how they were getting in such rough shape. Obviously, 2 years ago, we approved the Greenwood, and that was done last year. And then last year, the Woodville was on the plan, but that also got kicked back because of cutting our budget because of the COVID. So we're happy to get that all back on there this year, and look forward to keeping a new playground on every year going forward. Next slide, please. So our recommended appropriation, we are actually surprised to keep it under 2 million, which is great. For our tax levy funds would be $1,982,325,019. The water enterprise will be 250,000 and the sewer enterprise 170,000. And I believe that is all.
Thank you. Any general questions?
Before we have questions, Frank, let me send it over to Joe Bertrand from FinCom, who is your liaison.
Thank you. As indicated, I think the Capital Planning Committee did an excellent job this year, especially going from that 6.5 million ask down to $1,982,325. And I'm not sure where the 19 cents comes from. But basically, the FinCom subcommittee had numerous discussions with Frank and the committee. They've done a very credible job going over and explained all of their reasons for these proposed projects. And as a result of that, the FinCom subcommittee recommends approval of the Capital Planning Committee budget for 2022.
Thank you, Joe. Do any members of the council have questions for Frank? Jonathan.
Not a question, just a quick comment. First of all, thank you to Frank and the Capital Planning Committee for their work that they've done, and just glad to see both the Woodville Playground and actually the ADA transition plan included in the capital budget. I think those are both great investments, and I think the roadmap that the ADA transition planning work will provide us for the future is going to be really valuable. So thank you, and appreciate seeing those.
Maureen.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo what Jonathan said, I heard a lot from Woodville parents for years. So thank you for getting that on the list. I'm sure they will be very appreciative. And I like the plan of hitting up some of the other playgrounds in town as well. So thank you for that.
Any other comments? No, I'm excited to see you finish off the police and fire communication system. I know that was really important for them. So that's great that we're doing it. Seeing no further comments or questions, I would ask for a motion and a second to approve fiscal year 2022 capital for $1,982,325.19. Moved by Ed, seconded by Jonathan. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie.
Yes.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
Ed.
Aye.
And Maureen.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Thank you all for sticking in there and for the great work you do. I know it's hard to focus on the projects that you think are most important. So thank you so much to the Capital Planning Committee.
Thank you.
Item number 9, banner. Oh,
excuse me. Did you do the water and sewer portion as well of that? No, I think you said the tax levy. I'm sorry.
Oh, I just, yeah. So I don't have.
So it'd be 170,000 for the sewer enterprise and 250 for the water enterprise. And you could do that in one motion if you wanted to.
Sorry, I missed that. So
Nope.
Can we please have a motion and a second to have 170,000 the water enterprise and 250,000 for sewer?
Actually reversed.
Okay.
Sewer, 250 water.
As town administrator said, I'm not even going to repeat the numbers. Moved by Paul.
Second.
Seconded by Jonathan. Seeing no discussion. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie.
Yes.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
Ed.
Aye.
And Maureen.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you for keeping me on my toes. You guys are all set. Item number 9, banners. We have proposed non-seasonal Main Street banners. And I know we have some folks from Main Street here. Bob, will you start this?
Sure, I'll start it. We do have Ian Hadley and Susan Wetmore's here, as well as Bob DeBella. I don't know if I missed anybody, but so what we're proposing is we're proposing that we're able to put up 25 permanent banners downtown. Basically, there's 50 poles downtown from what we can really count, and just going down Main Street, staying within our district. starting right around the library area, running down to farmlands. So on both sides of the street. So what we're looking for is approval for 25 permanent ones, and then hopefully so that would be every other pole. So, and then we have seasonal ones that we're also working on and would like to propose for those other 25 poles if they're not tied up by other groups in town. We've worked, or I should say, when I say we, it's really Ann Hadley has worked tirelessly with Jen McDonald from the town to work on the design of the flags, which I believe you have right in front of you, I'm hoping. With regards to color palettes, the fonts that we used, and the overall design and strength of the banners. So we're hoping that we can have those approved this evening so that we can order them and get them up.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Does anyone have any questions for Bob or any other members of the committee if they were involved in this? Any counselors? No. Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the offer from Main Street, certainly. Just to understand the logistics of this, then, so are you suggesting donating 25 banners now and then at a later point in time coming back with the seasonal banners, or are you suggesting doing it as one package?
Well, originally we had submitted them as one package, but I noticed on the agenda this evening that they were it was just for the permanent one. So I guess maybe I'd have to ask Steve on that one, but we have run basically 125 banners, 5 different designs through Jen, working with Jen on those, and they would all be paid for by Main Streets.
Just for clarification, I think that Ann and I had spoken, and Ann said that we're just doing the seasonals now. Just doing the bandstand ones now.
Okay.
So we're basically talking like every other poll then, right? Is that
correct?
Yep. Present. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Actually, Madam Chair, the only other thing would be, I would just say that to the council, I know that we have the veterans banners that are coming down the pike. I'm working with Mr. Mayo and the Veterans Advisory Board on that. I don't know where we'll land with the high school, et cetera. So I would just, say that these seem like they're almost like evergreen, in nature, and that they're available as, being able to be displayed, but obviously it would be within our discretion from time to time when other, banners would be more appropriate to put up, say in place of these. Obviously, we reserve that discretion. I would just ask that we be mindful of that with this vote.
Sure.
But I fully support it, and I thank Main Streets for their efforts.
And Bob, I assume that that's something that your group understands as well, that occasionally we would have other reasons to put other banners up.
Yeah, of course. We've had discussions with some members of the veterans group already, and we certainly understand. We support everything they do. So if it, the other part of us, we were hoping with just having the 25 permanent, we'd be able to maybe save some of those groups, not necessarily the veterans groups, but some of the other groups, the cost of having to order all 50 to fill the polls, because when, you know what I mean? So if we're doing 25 all the time, it might be a little less expensive and a little less cumbersome to some of the other organizations to only have to fill 25 polls instead of all 50. Because it does get expensive, to be honest.
Yeah. No, that sounds, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Any other questions or comments from members of the council? All right. Seeing none, and thank you for all the work you're doing as well. We need a vote to accept the 25 proposed non-seasonal Main Street banners that the council would occasionally have reason perhaps to remove some if there was a need to put others up, but we accept them with thanks, certainly.
So moved.
Moved by Ed?
Second.
Seconded by Paul. Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie,
Aye.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Ed,
Aye.
and Maureen.
Yep.
Excellent.
Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for everything you've done and for hanging in there for our long meeting. And Anne, thank you for your work as well. Okay, moving on to item number 10. A proclamation for this Wakefield Savings Bank 40th anniversary. And I see Bob DeBella here.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make it clear that it's our branch at the high school, First Educational Savings.
I'm
Branch,
sorry, yes.
40th anniversary. If I could make just a brief comment and then, is that with you, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. As we hit the 1-year mark of the pandemic, some students have returned to classrooms that look very different than in the past. Other schools can't even welcome their students back yet due to space concerns or ventilation issues or health concerns. There were bank lobbies that couldn't stay open, and although most have reopened now, there were adjustments that had to be made for employee and customer safety. Our First Educational Savings Branch at its 40th anniversary suffered from both these issues. Once a vibrant office where Wakefield Memorial High School students learned to become bankers while serving their community, the branch doors have remained closed since last spring. The First Educational Savings Branch of the Savings Bank was chartered by the Massachusetts Commissioner of Banks in early 1981 and began serving the banking needs of Wakefield High School students, staff, and administrators on April 6th of that year. The bank earned national and international recognition as the first student-run and operated banking branch, aptly named the First Educational Savings Branch, and has been the model for similar student-run branches throughout the world. As the vision of the late Donald E. Garant, former president and CEO of the Savings Bank, the branch grew into a successful partnership between academia and the financial world since its beginning. Scores of business leaders and legislators from across the United States and from several countries have toured the banking office at the high school to emulate the operation in their own city, state, or country. Over the years, nearly 200 students have had the opportunity to manage and operate the school branch. With a renewed sense of hope to open the branch for the next school year, we look forward to helping many more students begin their careers through the partnership with Wakefield Memorial High School and the Savings Bank. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. And again, as a graduate of Wakefield High School, I remember looking with so impressed by the students that worked in the school bank. And, you know, they were always looked so professional and they a little sharper than the rest of us. So I appreciate everything that the Savings Bank has done for those students. So I have a proclamation that I can quickly read because I think it is important for us to acknowledge based on the historical significance of the bank. Whereas in December 1980, the Wakefield Savings Bank, now the Savings Bank, requested a hearing with Mass Banking Commission to grant approval for a student-run banking facility at Wakefield Memorial High School. And whereas approval was granted by the commissioner following the first ever formal banking hearing conducted outside the commission's Boston office, culmination of 15 months of preparation by bank staff, Wakefield Memorial High School students and school officials, including Dr. Stephen Mayo and James Neenan. And whereas the First Educational Savings Branch began operations at Wakefield Memorial High School on April 6, 1981, fulfilling the dream of then President Donald E. Garant, becoming the first such banking facility for educational purposes in the United States. And whereas 5 high school students became the first officers of the First Educational Savings Branch, serving as bank officers, loan officers, and tellers, and performing all banking functions, a tradition which continues today. Whereas the First Educational Savings Branch serves as a model for student-run banking facilities throughout the world, drawing attention and visitations from officials from as far away as Ireland and Tokyo. And whereas the First Educational Savings Branch is part of the Savings Bank, was responsible for establishing school banking opportunities in all Wakefield elementary and middle schools through the club, Children Learning to Understand Banking. And whereas the Savings Bank and First Educational Savings Branch have continued Mr. Grant's commitment to financial literacy and education by donating more than $77,850 to the Wakefield School Department since 1981, and by establishing the Donnelly Grant Foundation, which has awarded $183,000 to financial education programs since 2001. Now, therefore, be it resolved that April 6, 2021 be declared First Educational Savings Branch of the Savings Bank Day in Wakefield in honor of the 40th anniversary of its opening, and for the contributions and commitment not only to financial literacy and education among all students, but also to the town of Wakefield. So thank you so much, Bob. That's something that the Wakefield Savings Bank, one of the many things they should be so proud of.
Well, thank you. We appreciate the proclamation on behalf of all the employees and the board of directors. We hope to be back in operation soon. So
absolutely.
Thank
great. Thank you so much. Okay. Item number 11. We have a gift acceptance, benches and kiosks donation from Wakefield Main Streets. And I think this is a formality, but I'm trying to.
I can jump in on this.
Could you jump in? I just lost my documents.
No problem. So apparently we did a search of our records, and between we received benches again from the Wakefield Main Streets and kiosks from Wakefield Main Streets on various dates between 2017 and 2019. And I think our intent at every one of those meetings was to accept these wonderful donations as gifts. And unfortunately, we don't have an official acceptance in the minutes. So I would ask, I have a letter from Bob Mailhoit, the president, requesting that we accept them as gifts for a couple. The main reason is that they feel that it gets it off of their liability plate and onto ours. And we, of course, have insurance in the Mass Tort Claims Act, so I'm not worried about liability at all. And I do want to read the end of this is where Bob Mailhoit says that Wakefield Main Streets is a proud partner of the town and its businesses and hopes to continue that in the years to come, as do we. So I would suggest to the town council that this is a formality and that we just set this straight so we do have it in the minutes that we did actually by motion accept the park benches and gifts donated and kiosks donated by Main Streets.
Thank you. Any questions for either Steve or Bob from members of the council? I know this was our intention. I remember the meeting. We just clearly weren't, we did not complete that intention. Seeing no comments or questions, can I please have a motion and a second as Town Administrator Mayo read the gifts?
So moved.
Moved by Paul.
Second.
Seconded by Julie. Roll call vote, myself. Julie? Yes.
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
And Maureen?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, off your plate, Bob, and on to ours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
for the
much.
gift. Thank you for the gift.
Thank you.
Item number 12, the Lake Boat concession. This is a motion for the public comment period to be extended to May 21st, 2021. This is something we had talked about at our last meeting. We're just extending the public comment period so that it will better fit the intention that I think the public comment period was meant to serve. Any comments or questions? Ed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On this one, I know that we talked about this before and we set the 30-day public comment period. And I think I speak for the whole council when I say there's no question that there's going to be amenities there. So this is not a debate about whether we're going to have canoes or paddle boards or anything of the sort. It's just a question of getting the public's comment about how the facility is currently and what improvements can be made going forward. And I know that some folks have expressed some interest in offering that input, which is great. I don't see a need for us to extend this another 30 days at this point, because then that's going to really put us out into May. And I think if the intention is to understand from folks, particulars about what it is they liked about the facility and what areas where we can have improvement, I think that can all be gathered now so that when the RFPs do come back and we have our proposals in hand, we'll already have that knowledge from residents about where their concerns lie and where their ideas are. So from there, I think it allows us to be able to be a little more strategic in terms of negotiating contract terms with whomever we choose. But I just think the season's coming up. I'd like to be able to have us advance to the signing a contract stage, and I don't really see us being able to do that with a public comment period still open, especially because the purpose of the public comment period is to help us to make sure we have the best contract we can. So I would actually ask that we just keep the period as it is currently, so that we and encourage everyone to reach out to us. But again, this is not a question about whether we're going to have watercraft being launched. It's just a question of what that looks like, and I think we can achieve that within this 30-day period. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Ed. Jonathan and then Julie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to respectfully disagree on two fronts to Councillor Dombrowski's comments. First of all, I do think that it's important to extend the comment period so that people have a chance to comment on the proposals that we receive in response to the RFP. And I expressed this 2 weeks ago. I think it's great to start soliciting feedback now and certainly welcome the ideas that people have and have heard from a number of folks with some great ideas. But I think for that comment period to be meaningful, I do think it's critical for residents to have a chance to respond to actual proposals in front of them. I don't think that forestalls the possibility of having boating on the lake for the summer. There's not a deadline as to when we need to get a contract in place. And so I do think it's in the best interest of the community that we extend the comment period. The other thing that I just want to say is, while I think that many of us on the council, and I include myself in that number, do want to see boating on the lake, I also don't want to dictate to residents what kind of comments they can make. And so I do think it's fair game for anyone who doesn't want to see boating on the lake to express that in the public comment period. I mean, that's the whole point of public comment, is to solicit information from the community. And while that may not be the intention of some of us or the majority of us on the council, and while we may want to move forward, again, I just don't want to forestall any resident from feeling that they have the ability to express their opinion if they have a difference of opinion in terms of what they want to see going forward. So I support extending the comment period through May 21st. I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's reasonable, and hope we vote to do so.
Thanks, Jonathan. Julie.
I think Jonathan said everything I was going to say more eloquently than I was going to say it, except to just confirm that the RFP has been issued. Steve's jumping around on me, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that the 30 days, as I think Jonathan mentions, brings us to before Memorial Day, which is sufficient time for us to have boating on the lake if that is determination. So I absolutely support the extension of 30 days public comment, so that people know what they're commenting on.
Thanks, Julie. Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This directed to Steve, please. Mr. Mayo, what prompted the additional 30 days to extend the comment period?
I think that some of the counselors were reached out by citizens that felt that they wanted to be able to comment on an actual proposal, as I understand it.
Are there reservations on whether or not we would typically lose potential bidders due to the shortening of the season?
I don't know. I mean, I don't have any. I mean, we're going out to bid. We'll have to see what happens. They would still be up and running, could be up and running by Memorial Day, which was the kind of the traditional start of the season anyway.
Okay, so it wasn't before Memorial Day that they
Maybe a week before, but not dispositive.
Okay, no, thank you, Mr. Mayo.
Ed.
I would say respectfully, there are plenty of contracts that come before the council. We don't put all of our contracts out for a 30-day comment period. I mean, we have the farmers market, for example. We approve that contract. We don't put that out for a 30-day comment period. We're allowing sufficient opportunity for residents to comment. I think it was pretty clear from our last meeting that the general consensus of this body was that we were going to continue to have this amenity. It's just how we can improve the amenity. And I think that's a question that can be answered sufficiently, and we can go into contract deliberations with that knowledge already in hand. And I disagree that leaving these potential businesses in limbo and saying, oh, you still have to wait longer, I disagree that it doesn't jeopardize us. I mean, they don't want to get an answer on May 25th that they've been selected for the season, and so I think we are risking losing out on opportunities with certain companies who might end up going elsewhere as a result of us not being able to act. I mean, 30 days, if someone has an issue with the votes, say that. They can say it. They've been saying it, and they'll continue to say it. We had comments come in, I think, within the last 24 hours, with photographs and all the rest. So if people have a position, they're certainly going to say it. They don't need to see a contract. We're not putting this contract out so that all members of the public can review the contract and offer comment on all the provisions. We haven't done that in any of our other contracts, so there's no precedent for doing that. And I'm all about having public input, but we'll get it, and we can get it. And those that are opposed to it are going to be opposed to it within 30 days or within the 60 days. So I don't see why this receives any sort of special dispensation here. I just disagree with it.
Thanks, Ed. Jonathan.
So I think the difference on this one is we do have a policy that this council has approved around lake structures and benches, and we're talking about putting stuff around the lake in the form of, a kiosk to, sell boating tickets, the actual structure where the boats would sit. There is a structure there now, but I think the challenge is that we don't know if that's the nature and layout of the structure that will exist under whoever responds to the proposal. And so that's why I think this is different from other contracts that we've signed. It's less about getting public input on the legal language of the contract and more about the structure and the footprint that's going to be there. That's, I think, what people want to respond to. And I just don't think we have enough information now before we go through that proposal process to be able to give people an adequate chance to comment.
Ed.
But it's our land, it's our town land, so we can decide what we want to do. So if residents feel strongly about what the footprint of structure looks like, we dictate that. So ultimately, it's not up for anyone that's going to bid for probably in all likelihood a 3-year contract to drive our decision making relative to how we have structures on our land. We can set those parameters. If we don't like temporary tenting, for example, then we prohibit that and say no, that's not going to be something that's going to happen. If we think something more permanent is appropriate, then that's the position we take. And we do have the structure policy, and we have it in place now. So we're getting those comments and feedback already. But I don't think that it's the contract then dictates how we react. I think we get the general the consensus of the town, and then we go into selecting a provider based upon that. I think that's the more appropriate approach because it's our property, and we're going to have the long-term impact of it, even after a 3-year contract may change hands and we may end up with a different provider in 3 years, or maybe a year and a half if we don't like whatever provider we end up signing with now. So I think that conceptually, if people have certain issues with structures and the like, let us know that now, because that's not dictated by a contract, that's dictated by our priorities.
Paul, then Julie.
I believe Julie was up first, Madam Chair.
I've already gone.
And then so I have an aye. So if you're making a second comment, I will let you go first.
All right, Julie.
I would just say that I disagree with you, Ed. I think the point of going out for an RFP is to get the most creative, expert contract structures that we can. None of the 7 of us are experts in running a boating program on a lake. And so I think the reason to go out to bid is we may get things that we have never even imagined would work around the lake, and we might like them or we might not like them, or we might like them, but the community might not like them. So I think it is absolutely imperative that this 30-day period go after we have seen not the legal language of the contract, but the schematic, the hopefully creative ideas that are going to emerge from this competitive process.
Thanks, Julie. Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm torn on this one a little bit because if I'm hearing correctly, I'm going to side with, not side with, but agree with Ed on this to a degree. If we really wanted to see certain components for the setup of the whoever gets the contract, we should have put it into the RFP. We shouldn't be saying, okay, bid on what we're doing, but we still have reservations and we want to have another 30 days to go over that. I don't think that that's what we put the RFP out for. That's just my opinion on this. To give them another 30 days for comment, they can give us that comment now. I don't see the need for another 30 days, to be honest with you, on this, because the design end of it is something that we would say, okay, here is what they presented to us. Which one do we want? If we get 3 or 4 different bids, we're going to pick the one that best suits the needs of the town in the community. We're not going to put something up that's going to be a 2-story barn with canoes in it. I mean, who's going to approve that? So I think that if we really wanted to specify exactly what was going to be on the shores of the lake, we should have put that into the RFP and we could have eliminated all this. And the discussion would have been, okay, placement, maybe, as to where it goes. But I'm going to say we should keep things as is right now. That's my general consensus as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I know that Peter also agrees with Ed and Paul. He doesn't think that we need 2 more months of input, that it's too long and not fair to the current company. I myself am torn. However, I'm torn on a couple of points. I don't like the policy. I think it's ambiguous. The 30 days, I don't know that it should apply to these structures. I know I get pushback on that, but I think the policy could be better written because I'm not sure this is what we thought of necessarily. I also think as a town council, we'll learn next time to do this earlier, to not do it as it's coming up to Memorial Day. So I feel like, we weren't looking at that too closely. Based on the existing policy, I feel like we have to, I feel like if we have to do the extra time. I'm not a fan of it, but I just don't know how we get around it with the policy. So, I don't know if there's a middling ground, because we'll get the RFPs sometime. We'll get the bid sometime April 21st-ish, Steve?
And that's the last date to bid, yes.
That's the last date to bid. So under the specifics of the policy, do we have to 30 days from the 21st? Is that necessary, or does 15 days work? Where they know that there's, we're talking about having a structure at the lake. And I agree with Ed, this isn't, people can say whatever they want. People can absolutely put the opinion that they don't want anything at the lake, but I think a lot of us are committed, or at least I am, that, we're gonna have something there. So is there any middle ground, or am I trying to be mediator, negotiator here? I don't know if there's a middle ground of counting. I don't know if it has to start counting from when we get the bids. If this has been, we're asking for input, people know where the site's going, they know kind of what's going to be there. They'll see the sites, they'll see the bids, and maybe we'll just get one. Hopefully we'll get one. I just don't know if the policy dictates that we have to do the 30 days from when they come in. So, but I think it does, and which is why I'd like to revisit the policy, frankly. Jonathan.
No, Madam Chair, I do think, as I'm recalling the policy, and I don't have it in front of me, there is some language around kind of 30 days or, kind of the next meeting. It is a little sort of oddly worded. I think the challenge, though, that we run into, though, is we haven't scheduled out our meetings for May, because we do our kind of town elections and reorganization before then. And so I think in light of that, my perspective is I think we have to interpret the policy as requiring the 30 days.
And that's kind of where I'm falling. Again, not being in love with the language of the policy. And if I would suggest that if we get someone, we assist them. If they have to put something up temporary for Memorial Day, they put something up temporary. That might not be the most beautiful thing, but they should be on the water Memorial Day weekend, frankly. So, I'm willing to discuss that when the time comes. Ed.
I mean, I had suggested and requested the RFPs at the last meeting with the expectation that we would have it all buttoned up and we'd have a provider in place well in advance and not jeopardize, losing the amenity for this season. So I'm concerned about where this is going. But also last meeting, we voted on the 30-day period. We're in that comment period now, and that period goes until April 8th. And Madam Clerk, do I have that date correct? I believe it's April 8th is the closing of the 30-day period.
Yeah, I believe you're correct.
And that's based on what we voted on last time. I mean, it's more than sufficient time. People who have issue with what is currently there are going to express that. Some already have, and some have ample opportunity to do it. But we're really putting ourselves in quite a bind where we could ultimately end up forfeiting the opportunity to have this amenity on the lake because we're at this point dragging it out too long. And I agree. This process should have begun earlier, but we are where we are currently. Let's not add an insult to injury with this. We have the 30 days. That will have been achieved by the time we get to April 8th, and then by then we'll have it. I mean, if you want to keep the period going until the last day for RFPs on the 21st, that's potentially another option. Although I frankly would like to review the feedback we've gotten so that by the time we get the proposals in, we will know where the priorities of the town lie and be able to look at the proposals through that lens.
Yeah, I mean, last meeting, I was willing to go with the same vendor, which we wouldn't have had this problem, but that's another story. And we could have revisited hiring out for the next year, or at the end of that contract, looking for new RFPs. But I'm split between my heart and my gut. I think the 30 days is too long. However, I think the policy, we're stuck by the language of this policy, which again, I would like to see revisited. Jonathan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion to move to extend the comment period to May 21st, 2021.
Second. Seconded by Maureen. Any further discussion? Right, seeing none. Roll call vote. Myself, reluctantly, yes. The policy language is getting me. Julie.
Yes.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Paul.
No.
Peter.
No.
Ed.
No.
Maureen.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-3. Appointments, item number 13. There's a request to advertise to add 3 members of the public to the Environmental Sustainability Committee. I received a note from Rob Darnell from the Environmental Sustainability Committee requesting town council to approve the addition of 3 more public members to the committee with staggered times. They currently have 4 public members, all with the same term limits. ESC proposes adding 3-year terms, 1 with an initial 2-year terms. So 4 terms would expire in 2022, 1 2023, 2 in 2024. The ESC did discuss this. They voted all in favor on March 11th. Any comment or questions about adding 3 more public members? Julie.
I can give a little background on this. So this committee has 8 members in total. 4 are appointed from the community by application, as are other committees, and 4 are essentially liaisons from town committees. So a liaison from town council, a liaison from DPW, a liaison from the school committee and the liaison from the light department. And so really when it comes down to kind of dedication and time to focus just on this committee, you know, you have half of the committee is very busy with other work as well. Definitely committed, but busy and torn in a lot of directions. And there's a lot to do in the Environmental Sustainability Committee. You saw the presentation on the green communities. There's activity around the recycling and plastic reduction. So in addition to it being an even number right now, the hope is that the town council will entertain adding 3 additional members.
Thank you, Julie. That seems to make a lot of sense. Any questions or comments about the addition of 3 members from the public? All right, seeing none, I'd like a motion in a second. And Sherry, I'm gonna bet on you figuring out the terms and all of that, because I'm not sure that I followed it. So they propose, ESC proposes adding 3 3-year terms, 1 with an initial 2-year term, correct? Yes, that's what it says. All right. Can I have a motion in a second as stated, please?
So moved.
Moved by Paul,
Second.
seconded by Julie. Seeing no further, Ed.
I just think going forward with, I feel like we keep adding on to these different, committees, and I think just going forward, we should probably have, a very solid approach just kind of across the board, because I know we just did it recently with Youth Council. We're doing it now with ESC, because we're going to end up with more and more committees that are going to have this creep. And I'm not speaking the merits on this particular, but just a more general comment of, we're going to have, 40 different committees of the size of FinCom, and it becomes somewhat more unruly to deal with. And then it makes appointments harder. It can sometimes dilute the applicant pool. There's a number of things that go on. And again, it's not specific to ESC, but it's just a more general comment about us having a more thoughtful approach, maybe in terms of why we have the numbers we have. And if we need to make adjustments, let's kind of proactively make them. And if we don't, let's stick with numbers we have in a more general sense.
Yep, I think that's a good point. I think the point here, though, is having all the liaisons bulk up the committee. I appreciate what Julie's saying in the ESC, that the liaisons might not be as invested as members of the public.
Right, I'm not disagreeing with Julie at all on that. I'm just a more general approach.
Sure, yep. Thank you, Ed. Okay, roll call vote to add the members as stated. Myself, yes. Julie?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
And Maureen?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Does anyone have any announcements or matters not anticipated for the agenda before the agenda was set? Jonathan.
Thank you. Couple of two announcements, and then just wanted to share some thoughts on something. First announcement, the Wakefield Vision 2030 first public survey is out now. It will be available until Friday, when that will come down. So we've had somewhere over 300 individuals take the survey so far, which is terrific. Obviously, love to get much more feedback in the next few days. So if anyone hasn't taken that survey, it is very short. It'll only take 5 to 10 minutes. Encourage folks to go on to the town website, wakefield.ma.us, click on the Vision 2030 button, and that will take you to that. Second thing I just wanted to mention from an announcement perspective, this is the first time that in many, many months where we actually haven't had an update on the COVID situation in Wakefield. And I want to just kind of remind the community that, while we haven't had an update today, that doesn't mean that, we're in good shape. In fact, we are seeing the numbers go up. And so, my announcement on this one is really just a plea to everyone to continue doing the responsible thing, wear your masks, practice social distancing. The light at the end of the tunnel, I think, is approaching. We've obviously had great news on sort of the progress on vaccines, but we still have a ways to go. And I would hate to see us as a community or as a state kind of take a step back in terms of rising infection rates because we've become complacent. So just wanted to put that out there. Finally, I just wanted to reflect just for a second on the panel discussion that the school committee hosted last week for Native American leaders as part of the decision making that they're doing around the high school logo. I would encourage anyone who has not didn't watch that at the time or hasn't seen it. I would encourage people to actually participate in that and look that up. It was a really enlightening panel. It was a difficult discussion to watch at times. It was an emotionally raw discussion to watch at times. But it was something that really was thought-provoking. And, you know, as we've had these discussions around the logo, I do think it's important to kind of hear the voices that were participating. I've been thinking a lot actually about, you know, one of the individuals who spoke, Dick Baird, who talked a lot about, you know, sort of what the logo meant to him in terms of how his family's remembered in Wakefield, and certainly understand and appreciate his sentiments around that. But as I was thinking about it over the weekend, it actually makes me a little bit sad, to be honest, because I think if we're looking for an opportunity to recognize the legacy of the Baird family in Wakefield, I actually don't think the logo does a very good job about it. It doesn't tie to their name, and you know, in terms of promoting kind of community memory about the Bairds, I worry that that's not really adequate to the contributions that the families made in town. And so I mention this because I would love to see us as a council and as a community maybe think about different ways to recognize the Baird family going forward, ways that we can attach their name to something that, you know, might have a little bit more permanence in terms of promoting a memory of the legacy of the Baird family. And I don't come today with any proposal to do that specifically, but would love to hear from people in the community about other ideas that they would have in that regard. So with that, I'll close out. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. And just to let people know, we've been holding a weekly COVID update on Fridays at 10:30 in the morning. It is now going to every other Friday, but they've been pretty well attended and they're posted on the website too. So if folks want some update. Maureen.
Thank you, Chair. So bear with me. I have a lot of updates and I'm reading some stuff because I've reached out to, as liaison to the public safety, I reached out to Chief Scory to get some updates since we hadn't heard from him in a while. So I'm just going to read what he sent me, but they're continuing to make progress with the public safety building project. An advisory group of police and fire personnel are having weekly meetings with the OPM and architect firm to work out details. And the permanent building committee is in the process of selecting a construction manager for the project. So that's pretty exciting. Second, some of you might have seen on social media, but the police have a new canine named Luna. Luna is 5 months old and was donated to the police department by Foxbin Labradors in Hillsborough. Luna will be partnered with Officer Ryan Doran, who was selected after a competitive process that involves 6 officers. I know people have been bringing sweets and gifts to Luna, so feel free to do that. Officer Grover, Botello, and Jancy, the 3 newest officers that we have, will be completing their field training at the end of March and will be assigned to patrol groups and working on their own for the first time shortly. And then lastly, Chief Scory just wanted me to pass on that all officers completed an 8-month training course this past month entitled Understanding Cultural Norms. So thank you for public safety in this time. Couple more updates, Chair. Thank you for the time. I got an email from a constituent this week about some of about the structures that the MBTA was putting on the Haverhill commuter line by Melrose Highlands. And I connected the constituent to Senator Jason Lewis and to Kate Lipper-Garabedian, and just for people to know, when the MBTA kind of does those constructions, when they put up those big signs, they don't tell us. So Steve, it's not part of our zoning. They don't need to tell us. Paul understands this world really well. So if you want to reach out to Councillor Donaco, he can get to the bottom of it, but we weren't told about it. And luckily, you know, Senator Lewis and Rep Lipper Garabedian were able to help out the constituents, but just for people to know, it was new to us. So reach out because we'll help you get connected and find out the answer, which we were luckily able to do. But just, reach out to Steve, reach out to one of the counselors when those things happen, but just a little MBTA, just like Broadway, where it's kind of out of our hands and it's in the Fed's hands. The MBTA is kind of out of our hands and they don't tell us. We're working on it. We're working on them actually giving us some notice, but not so great. 3 more things to say. One, I just even listening to the stretch goals presentation is I know we have all these we're winning all these grants, Steve, and I'd love for that to be somewhere communicated because I just think it's so amazing in the past of like even during pandemic of just kind of these grants, Board of Health, the schools. I'd love that to be communicated because I think it's so impressive what you and your team have been able to do. And on that way, as we talk about communicating, I heard the frustration of people from Crescent Street area and Broadway earlier, and I thought you did a really great explanation this today, an update from 2 weeks ago of where we are. And if there's a way, Jen McDonald and WCAT can cut that and share that, I think that would be really great. So people don't have to watch the whole meeting, but can kind of, click here to hear Broadway Street updates. I just think you explain things in a way that made sense to everyone. But, we don't normally get that information out there for people. It's not like it's too long of an article to read or a Facebook post. So just an idea about that to get that out there. And then last thing, thank you, Chair, just to give me a moment of personal privilege. And I thank you for what you said at the moment at the beginning, but I just do want to recognize that what happened in Atlanta last week, we all witnessed another horrific shooting, this one targeting the Asian American community. We grieve for the victims and their families. There were moms, daughters, and grandmothers. One victim was a vet. I just want people, especially my AAPI neighbors in Wakefield, to know that we see you and we hear you and we appreciate you. And we are going to do better on making everyone feel safer in town. So I've been in touch with Steve and Ann to do some reach out to the business communities. And as Ann said, to residents and our students, hate has really become a public health crisis and racism has become a public health crisis in our country. And I just want people in Wakefield to know, please reach out and we are here to listen and learn together. Thank you, Ann.
Thanks, Maureen. Julie.
And thank you, Maureen, for those words and Jonathan as well. I think those are 2 really important issues that we're seeing, in Wakefield and beyond our borders, and it's important to give voice to all of it. My update is tomorrow at 7. There is a Safe Streets Working Group. That's the group where we talk about bikes and walking and sharing roads. There's some exciting news about a grant from the MAPC to do a comprehensive bike study, and so we'll be talking about that tomorrow. The other thing is that the METCO program, it was supposed to be this week, but it looks like it's been postponed to the end of next week. They're doing a presentation of Hellfighters, a play program. And I think, I don't know a whole lot about it, but it looks really interesting. And I would encourage people to go to their website or their Facebook page. It's about a family kind of who takes on a fight. So I would encourage people to look that up. There's some really good programming out there while we're still all Zoom, quarantined.
Thanks, Julie.
Sure.
Any other comments? Announcements? Ed? Oh,
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to remind everyone again that March is the White Ribbon Campaign Month. It's the month to draw awareness to violence against women and girls and all gender-based violence. And it's a really important campaign. There's in the coming days going to be the premiere of the video with incredible thanks to WCAT for making it happen, and some great members of our community who came together to speak out and stand up to violence. And it's going to be something that I think hopefully will have an impact. And if it helps just one person, then it's been worth the effort. But it's been a labor of love, as Ryan Boyd on this the telecast can confirm, but it's been well worth it. So keep an eye out for that. And please, when you do see it, please watch it and please share it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Paul?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we're all aware, at the beginning of our meeting tonight, multiple people reached out to the councilors to express various concerns throughout the town that have an impact on their way of life in the community. I personally have been receiving emails. I've been stopped when I've been walking neighborhoods. There's a lot of concern out there with the amount of construction that's going on, street closures. I'm telling all of them at this point in time to reach out to the councilors in general via email and direct them to either the town administrator or to the town clerk. I mean, the administrative clerk to forward the information to the entire body, because I'm really at no means to help them at this point in time. I can direct their calls to them, but they all want to be heard. There's some major concerns from them. The people on the west side right now, the Albany Street area, maybe half a dozen people I've been in contact with. Farm Street, maybe another half a dozen people. But there's concerns throughout the entire town, and the people just want answers. They want to know why and what can be done, or what support can they get. They don't feel that they're getting the support right now. But I don't know what else to tell them at this point. We have 12 potential construction possibilities going to develop over the next 2 to 3 years. How do we acclimate everything? And then the town's going to be doing its own work. I don't know if there's an answer to it or not. I just don't know how to address all the people. But, you know, we serve the community. The community doesn't serve us. So we have to just step up to the plate and try to take care of everyone that's out there, I guess. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Steve?
I'm all set. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Looks like we're all good. Okay. So I need a motion and a second for adjournment. Our next meeting is Monday, April 12th at 7 p.m. via Zoom.
So moved.
Moved by Paul.
Second.
Seconded by Ed. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Jonathan?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Paul?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Julie?
Aye.
And Peter?
Yes.
Excellent. Coming in under 4 hours, people, but hey, we did it. Thank you all very much. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Have a
Good night,
great
all.
week.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.